Chapter 1570. See Xiang City in the sky above a boundless area. There was a gigantic group of people flying in the sky. There were strong winds and beasts too. They all blotted out the sky. At that moment, there was a sharp sword traveling in the clouds, whistling and emitting blasting sounds as it flew. It was Lin Feng. He was gazing into the distance as he appreciated just how vast the great world was. If he had been in the small world, he wouldn't have been able to see such varying landscapes. People were sitting on clouds. Each of their chi was incredible. Some of them were even enigmatic and unfathomable cultivators. Strong cultivators were numerous in the great world, and as Lin Feng became strong, he continued seeing people who were even stronger than him. Someday, he'd definitely stand at the top of the continent of the 9 clouds though. The sword he was riding on was his Tianji sword. It was now even faster than the gigantic sword he had received. Xiang City was extremely far from Yaoyi Island. So, he needed to travel as fast as he could. Many strong cultivators had already started their journey to Xiang City, but Lin Feng hadn't followed them. He had decided to practice cultivation for a while instead. He had already left Yaoyi Island for a month before he finally reached the sky above Xiang City. Xiang City was gigantic, much larger than Ba Huang in the small world. Lin Feng's target destination was the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace, located inside the Forbidden Area. Many other people were looking for the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace already. The Everlasting Celestial Emperor's godly awareness had told Lin Feng that he had left many bronze tablets in that world, so there would be more individuals who had a piece of the old man's awareness. Even if they didn't have 5 bronze tablets, with just 3 or 4, they could still know that the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace was in Xiang City. According to legends, the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace contained the Everlasting Celestial Emperor's teachings and memories. Many incredibly strong cultivators were attracted by the dream of getting their hands on them. The Everlasting Celestial Emperor's everlasting spells were unfathomable, so much so that some of his disciples had become incredible cultivators themselves. Many of them had even become great emperors. Of course, Xiang City's people didn't fear seeing more tourists or migrants. These immigrants helped contribute to the strength of the city. If Lin Feng hadn't received the Everlasting Celestial Emperor's godly awareness, he wouldn't have come to Xiang City at all. There were countless powerful cultivators who were looking for the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace. There were even many great emperors who were looking for those vestiges. However, the godly awareness had warned Lin Feng about that. "What a great sword," said someone at that moment. There were 4 people. Amongst them, there was a beautiful woman who was looking at Lin Feng. She had seen Lin Feng and his Tianji sword, and she was amazed. Lin Feng's sword had great thunder and wind energies. It also had 7 colors gleaming from it. Those people all had swords on their back, making them look like sword cultivators. Therefore, the beautiful woman had noticed Lin Feng particularly. One of the young men with her looked at Lin Feng and said, "Swords are used to kill people. Those who use swords as ornaments shouldn't be called sword cultivators. They also don't deserve to practice sword cultivation. That's your opinion. There are many ways to achieve enlightenment and there are many ways to practice sword cultivation. Each person is different and will choose different paths in life. What you like isn't necessarily applicable to other people," said the girl indifferently. Next to her, there was a young man dressed in black clothes. His eyes were closed as he thought about this. He had an ancient sword resting on his back, sheathed. "What you say is not groundless. But I've always believed that sword cultivators are killers and not people who try to dazzle," said that young man again. The girl wasn't looking at him anymore though, so he was a bit annoyed. She looked at the young man in black clothes. Ever since he had joined Sword Mountain, she had been interested in him. How can you judge a person just by looking at their sword? They say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, said the girl putting as she brushed her hair away. The one in black clothes still remained silent. She was annoyed. He didn't pay attention to anyone. It was no wonder that girls liked him, because of his mysteriousness. "Ruoxia, open your eyes and tell us what you think," said the girl to the young man in black clothes. Ruoxia opened his eyes and asked, "Where?" "There, that beautiful sword," said the girl smiling and pointing at the Tianji sword. Ruoxia turned around and saw the Tianji sword. He was astonished. He looked at the young man in white clothes on the sword, then he suddenly smiled in a resplendent way. The girl was surprised to see Ruoxia smile in such a resplendent way. This was a guy who rarely showed any emotion. "Quick!" said Ruoxia, accelerating and moving at full speed. "Lin Feng!" shouted a voice. Lin Feng suddenly turned around after he heard that familiar voice. Lin Feng saw a friend and he smiled back in a resplendent way. Ruoxia. They were happy to see each other again. They both stretched out their hands and bumped fists. "I'm so happy to see you again," said Ruoxia, sighing. They hadn't met for 2 years now. They were like brothers in the small world, not knowing if the other was still alive. Lin Feng nodded, he was also happy. Where were the other disciples from Tiantai? "Lin Feng, how is our teacher?" asked Ruoxia. He suddenly seemed nervous. Lin Feng and Emperor Yu had left together back then, but Emperor Yu wasn't with him now, so he was worried. "We haven't met each other for 1.5 years now, but when we left, he was already cured. With his strength, even in the great world, as long as he's careful there shouldn't be any problems," said Lin Feng. Ruoxia felt a bit relieved. "Do you have any news from our fellow disciples?" asked Ruoxia. "Ban Ruo, Li Hen, Xingzhan are being controlled by Celestial Qi Castle," said Lin Feng. Ruoxia looked furious after he heard that. He had escaped from Celestial Qi Castle and had spent a lot of time in the desert. Of course, he knew about the 9 great celestial castles, so when things had calmed down, he left and had joined Sword Mountain. "Ruoxia, what about you? Do you have any news from our brother Muchen?" asked Lin Feng. He was used to calling him Muchen. He controls soul cosmic energies, so he must be fine. Concerning our second brother, I saw him break free and escape. I don't know where he went. I have no news from the others though, said Ruoxia. He was worried and hoped that everybody was fine. Someday, the 11 disciples of Tiantai will reunite, said Lin Feng. They had to become stronger if they wanted to annihilate Celestial Qi Castle and save all their friends, including Yuan Fei. Lin Feng wanted to bring Yuan Fei to Yaoyi Island to see all the powerful animals there. "Lin Feng, what if Tiantai rose in the great world? Then all the disciples would be reunited," said Ruoxia. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. "Tiantai in the great world. Rebuild Tiantai. In 100 or 1,000 years, we won't be the only ones who would have come out of the small world. Maybe if Tiantai rises, we'll be able to recruit some of those rising cultivators and we'll be able to take control over the small world. That is also our teacher's dream," explained Ruoxia. Chapter 1571. Former site. There were 11 disciples in Tiantai. Apart from the 3 who were controlled by Celestial Qi Castle and Ruoxia, there were 6 other people from whom they had heard no news. If Tiantai could rise in the great world, they'd have to gather all the disciples. They'd also need Mu Chen and Emperor Yu. Besides, Mu Chen also controlled the Watchers and wanted to achieve certain goals with them, including the destruction of the Imperial Assassin Union. They also hoped that the small world could become a free world, removing external forces from controlling them. "We're not strong enough, so we can't control a group of influence in the great world. We could easily be destroyed by others if we tried. However, I'll keep that in mind. When we become stronger, we can try then," said Lin Feng after having remained silent for a few minutes. Ruoxia agreed, of course. "Indeed, I understand," said Ruoxia, nodding. "Ruoxia, is that one of your friends from the small world? I wouldn't have thought that you people could be so determined, but it's a good thing. To establish an influential group in the great world, you need a high-level emperor at least. It's a bit too early to talk about that though," said the young man with whom the girl had been talking before. "Brother Ruoxia, you're not in the small world anymore," said that young man. "Thank you very much for your advice," said Ruoxia calmly. He was talking to Lin Feng and didn't want that young man to join their conversation. "By the way, where do you practice cultivation these days?" asked the young man to Lin Feng indifferently. "On an island," Lin Feng replied. "You should join Sword Mountain. I see that you're also a sword cultivator. Sword Mountain is a paradise for sword cultivators. I can even recommend you," said the girl, politely smiling at Lin Feng. "Sister," said the young man angrily. He then added, "Sister, people have their own way of practicing cultivation, and the Sword Mountain doesn't recruit people that easily. It's not something you do just like that. Trying doesn't harm anyone," said the girl. "Of course, if you want to try and join Sword Mountain, no problem, we really can recommend you, but it still won't be an easy process," said the young man smiling at Lin Feng. "It's all right, but thank you," said Lin Feng. He didn't know why that young man was making fun of him, but he didn't feel like arguing with them. "Ruoxie, let's talk privately," said Lin Feng to Ruoxie. Then, both silhouettes flickered, and they moved far away. "Lin Feng, in this world, people are not like us. It's much easier to become stronger in this world," said Ruoxie calmly. That young man kept provoking Lin Feng because he liked that girl and partly because they were from a small world. "They haven't gone through as many hardships as we have and they're not as wise and mature," said Lin Feng nodding. "Indeed, in this world, there's a kind of pill people take at birth which changes their bodies. Afterwards, it helps them swallow the chi of the earth and sky before having even started practicing cultivation. There can even be Tian-level babies born in this world. Everybody takes that pill at birth in this world. Even if it's expensive, their elders will find a way to buy it." Lin Feng was astonished when he heard Ruoxie and smiled wryly. It reminded him of those people in the Celestial Walls manor who had grown up with an understanding of force, and on top of that they inherited a powerful blood strength from their ancestors. Those people were already Tian-level cultivators when they were babies. At that time, they were still trying to find themselves. They didn't know what they wanted to become in the future. At the age of 15, in the Great World, people were already Zun cultivators. "Apart from that, where are you going now?" asked Ruoxie to Lin Feng. "I'm going to the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace," replied Lin Feng. Ruoxie smiled and said, "You also came for that?" But Ruoxie looked nervous and said, "Lin Feng, many disciples from Sword City came here. We're a small group, but according to legends I've heard in Sword Mountain, the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace shouldn't have appeared in its former location. We should try some other places and try our luck. I've also heard that it could be in the periphery of its former location," said Lin Feng smiling. Ruoxie nodded and said, "All right, I'll stay with you, but we shouldn't hope too much." Then they both accelerated. Those behind them had to struggle to catch up with them because they were too fast. "Ruoxie, where are you going?" asked the girl. "Great Imperial Everlasting Palace's former location," said Ruoxie. The girl frowned, and the young man said mockingly, "Are you insane? Why would the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace be on its former site?" "I didn't ask you to come," said Ruoxie indifferently. The young man looked upset as he said to the girl, "Since it's that way, we can separate from them." "Indeed, you can stay alone. I'm going with Ruoxie," said the girl. Then she caught up with Ruoxie and Lin Feng, and the young man behind looked even more upset. However, he still chased after them. One day later, Lin Feng and the others arrived in another place in Xiang City. There were gigantic ruined palaces resting in front of them. It looked like a former city. The Great Imperial Everlasting Palace's former site, thought Lin Feng. Even though there were only ruins, it still looked majestic. Lin Feng could imagine the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace back in the days, lofty, domineering, majestic. Back then, the Everlasting Celestial Emperor lived in his own palace, which is the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace we talked about. It disappeared along with the Everlasting Celestial Emperor, though it used to be here," said the girl pointing at an empty field. There were ruins all around, but the Great Imperial Everlasting Palace had long since disappeared. All the other palaces around were palaces where his disciples lived. "I've heard that the Everlasting Celestial Emperor fell because of one or several of his disciples. I don't know whether it's true or not," said the girl. "Sister," shouted her fellow disciple suddenly. He looked grave and solemn. The girl suddenly stopped talking as if she realized that she had said something she shouldn't have. Even though the Everlasting Celestial Emperor had fallen, some of his disciples were still alive, and some of them were even terrifying great emperors. They could destroy Sword Mountain entirely if they wished so. There were many others there with them, all trying to find the same thing. Lin Feng glanced at the people around them. The everlasting celestial emperor had fallen for so many years and yet it still attracted so many people. What an honor! Chapter 1572, The Forbidden Area of Xiang, Lu Yao. People from Sword Mountain came to see Xiang City too, said someone in the distance, looking at Ruo Xie and the others. Lu Yao was precisely the young man who kept provoking Lin Feng and Ruo Xie. They're here too. Lu Yao was surprised. Sword Mountain didn't send any emperors? Asked that person glancing at Lu Yao and Ruo Xie. Apart from Lin Feng, Lu Yao and the others were cultivators of the 9th Zunqi layer, without any emperors to protect them. We came alone, so we don't know whether Sword Mountain has sent any emperors yet, said Lu Yao honestly. You're just like us, Lu Yao. We should stick together in case any of the emperors here attack us. What do you think? Asked that person to the team from Sword Mountain. Their team was the same as the team from Sword Mountain, 3 people, 2 men and a woman. They had also all broken through to the 9th Zunqi layer. What do you think, sister? Should we stay together? Ruo Xie, what do you think? Asked Lu Yao to the girl and Ruo Xie, but he ignored Lin Feng. The 2 of us are enough, said Ruo Xie. He wasn't interested in joining those people. Lu Yao groaned coldly. Sister, they don't care about you, so let's just go, said Lu Yao to the girl. Ruo Xie was obviously talking about him and Lin Feng. But he was amused because those 2 came from a small world and couldn't be that strong. If they stayed alone, they'd probably be in danger. Do you mind if I stay with you? Asked the girl to Ruo Xie and Lin Feng with a cute face. As Lin Feng and Ruo Xie had said, those people had high cultivation levels but weren't mature at all. She was acting like a kid. She can, said Lin Feng to Ruo Xie smiling. That girl was hot. Maybe she could become Ruo Xie's girlfriend in the future. Ruo Xie remained silent but finally nodded, all right. The girl smiled at Lin Feng. Your sword is very beautiful. What kind of sword is it? Its name is Tianji, replied Lin Feng. Lu Yao looked back at them in a cold way and groaned. He was already with the other group. Lin Feng, where are we going to find clues? Asked Ruo Xie. Since they had come all the way to see Xiang City, they had to try their luck in finding the great imperial everlasting palace. I've heard about a restricted area. Ruo Xie, I think we should go there, said Lin Feng with a glint in his eye. He didn't say that the palace was there, and he didn't even know how to get into the forbidden area anyways. Ruo Xie didn't know either, therefore, they would need to do some reconnaissance. I've also heard about a forbidden area. It's very dangerous, even great emperor don't dare go there. It is said that nobody ever comes back once they enter, said the girl nodding. She was also very curious about it. Ruo Xie didn't mind, he had left Sword Mountain to gain experience. The 3 of them all had a map of Xiang City, so they knew where to go. When Lu Yao and the others saw the others leave, they were intrigued. Lu Yao said, we have no clues either, so let's go to the forbidden area too. The forbidden area wasn't far from the former site of the great imperial everlasting palace. The entrance was gigantic, but it was misty, so people could only guess what was inside. It was said that great emperors could make a few steps in and then come back safe. However, as they went further in, even great emperors wouldn't make it out. Lin Feng and the others stood outside as they looked at the misty entrance. Lin Feng's eyes were twinkling. He had gathered some information about the forbidden area, but everything was the same and nothing was useful. People just said that it was very dangerous and that even great emperors never came back out alive. It was difficult to imagine that the everlasting celestial emperor had chosen that place to establish his palace. Lin Feng noticed many people around them, but most of them looked dispirited. They didn't look interested after they looked at the mysterious mist. Lin Feng understood that those people were like him, that they had learnt something about the forbidden area from the godly awareness left by the emperor. They were just guarding the gate to see if anyone would come out with anything. Get in, said Lin Feng. Suddenly, his Tianji sword whistled and pierced through the mist, suddenly entering the forbidden area. Bzz. Many people saw him and rushed over. They glanced at him but quickly lost interest. He was only a boy of the 8th Zunqi layer. Even some great emperors had used weapons, to which their godly awareness was connected, to inspect the forbidden area, but they had found nothing. Inside the forbidden area, Lin Feng's Tianji sword saw darkness, space-like darkness. At some point the sword stopped and shook. It released wind and empty space energies, ready to escape just in case. Slash. A terrifying wind swallowed the Tianji sword. Suddenly, it flew away. In the darkness, terrifying destructive energies attacked the Tianji sword, seemingly capable of consuming the sword in one strike. "Come out!" shouted Lin Feng. The Tianji sword immediately flew towards the exit and then reappeared next to Lin Feng. It was buzzing, looking extremely scared. "What a powerful sword," said the young woman next to Ruoxie. They didn't know how dumbstruck Lin Feng was at that moment. While the Tianji sword was in the forbidden area, Lin Feng had had the sensation that the connection between him and his sword was going to be broken. Luckily, he had reacted in time and saved it. "What did you see inside, Lin Feng?" asked the girl. "It's just darkness and there's a terrifying destructive wind. There are some lights too, they look like some type of counterforce. I can only imagine how destructive they were," said Lin Feng. According to legends, the forbidden area existed before Xiang City. Nobody knows what that place is though. Some people say that in the past, the everlasting celestial emperor used terrifying spells to travel inside, but nobody really knows whether it's true or not, said the girl. Chapter 1573, Forbidden Area's Lights. Lin Feng was convinced that there had to be some people already inside. In the great world, there were many terrifyingly strong cultivators. If one of these extremely strong cultivators had managed to go inside, they probably wouldn't talk about it to just anyone. At that moment, some people arrived next to everyone and looked at Lin Feng, or more precisely, at his sword. That sword had been into the forbidden area and had come back out. Even though it had only lasted a few seconds, they were still awed by it. If they could get that sword, they would also be able to see what was inside the forbidden area. Lin Feng sensed those greedy eyes looking at him. "That sword seems useful after all," said Lu Yao at that moment. "Everybody, I only glanced at the entrance and saw that there's a terrifying destructive strength inside. My sword was almost destroyed inside, that's why I brought it back as soon as I could. That sword is connected to my soul, and I've been raising it for a long time, so even if it's in someone else's hands, it's useless." Lin Feng explained to the crowd calmly. Lin Feng's message had the intended effect. When the crowd heard him, many of them forgot about it. Lin Feng was right, he had raised it so it would only listen to him. Anyone can control a weapon if they're strong enough. Your cultivation level is low, and you can use the sword to get inside, so if a stronger cultivator used it and cleansed it, they'd be able to explore the forbidden area, reasoned Lu Yao. Even though he sounded calm on the outside, on the inside, he was smiling coldly. "My cultivation level is low? Are you implying is that your sword is more powerful than my sword?" said Lin Feng, glancing back at Lu Yao indifferently. Lin Feng didn't usually care about his provocations, but this time, he was provoking everybody else against him. Lu Yao looked at Lin Feng, his eyes gleaming with sword lights. In Sword Mountain, swords were equivalent to people's lives. They loved swords more than anything else. Lin Feng had only broken through to the 8th Zunqi layer and was from a small world, so Lu Yao didn't fear him. "Indeed, that's exactly what I think," said Lu Yao, emphasizing each of his words. Surprisingly, he was even releasing sharp energies and condensing a sword. Slash. Lin Feng's Tianji sword was furious as it suddenly spat out thunderous energies. The thunderous energies moved quickly, instilling some fear into Lu Yao. The lightning collided with Lu Yao's sword lights and their energies exploded against each other. But even then, the Tianji sword continued moving towards Lu Yao's throat. "Die!" shouted Lu Yao. He suddenly released sharp sword lights from his third eye while condensing a sharp sword with his godly awareness. He had no choice but to use his godly awareness at this point. The Tianji sword and his godly awareness collided. Lu Yao shook violently, it felt like his godly awareness was going to explode. Lu Yao thought that he was doomed. He hadn't believed that Lin Feng's sword could be that fast. He didn't even have time to use his full strength. However, Lu Yao realized that he was still alive. Lin Feng had recalled his Tianji sword, which was now floating above his head. Lin Feng didn't kill him. Lu Yao looked depressed as he recalled his godly awareness. He felt humiliated. He was a disciple from Sword Mountain, but he still lost to a nobody in a contest of swords. Brother Lu Yao, don't fret, he just attacked you by surprise is all. In a real battle, you could have won, said one of the young men in the group Lu Yao had joined. He had already sacrificed his sword a moment before coming to see Xiang City. If he hadn't, he might have won. I guarantee you that if you hadn't sacrificed your sword, the results would be the same. You wouldn't even have an opportunity to unsheath your sword. Besides, you won't have a second chance, said Lin Feng calmly. Brother Lu Yao, if you're not determined, you don't deserve to be called a sword cultivator, said the one next to him. Lu Yao's looked horrified. If he backed down now, it would be a sign of weakness. After all, Lin Feng was weaker than him in cultivations, so there should be no reason for him to cower away. Do you want to die? Said Lin Feng to the one who was provoking him. Lin Feng knew what that guy's intentions were. If you want to die, come here, said Lin Feng. He released cold sword energies which surrounded that person. That person's heart started racing. He also released terrifying energies. That person's chi progressively weakened and finally disappeared. He ended up groaning from the effort. He had come for the great imperial palace, not to fight against this Lin Feng nobody. Let's go, said that person turning around and leaving. Lu Yao glanced at Lin Feng in a deep and meaningful way before he left. He wanted his godly awareness to stabilize before he fought against Lin Feng again. People around them also left after that. Then, Lin Feng returned his attention back to the entrance of the forbidden area. Let's go, said Lin Feng, going to another place. Ruoxie and the girl followed him. The girl thought that Lin Feng was rather mysterious. His dazzling sword was extremely powerful. If Lin Feng hadn't controlled himself, he could have destroyed Lu Yao's godly awareness and killed him. A short time after, Lin Feng and the others traveled a few hundred meters away, still on the periphery of the forbidden area. The Tianji sword kept buzzing and shaking. It was surrounded by wind and empty space energies. It was also surrounded by thunders. It was getting ready to protect itself against the lights inside the forbidden area. Go in. Lin Feng's Tianji sword penetrated the forbidden area again. His soul and his sword were connected so he could clearly sense everything his sword sensed. As before, there was only darkness inside, but there was also those star-like light projections. The destructive strength from before rose again. How come I have the impression that it is like a starry sky? Thought Lin Feng. His Tianji sword rushed back, and he continued moving along. It was always the same, no matter where Lin Feng probed. But during one of these probes, a shooting star passed by. With its appearance, there were more and more lights which contained destructive energies. What a terrifying strength, thought Lin Feng, shaking. He made his Tianji sword come back and frowned. It seemed that with his strength, he basically couldn't go into the forbidden area. Chapter 1574, Gigantic Elephant. Lin Feng, why do you keep exploring the forbidden area? Asked Ruoxie. He didn't understand. Since Lin Feng knew what was inside, why did he need to keep observing it? Was there any hidden secret inside? Since the disciples of the everlasting celestial emperor explored the whole city and found nothing, there must be something in the forbidden area, said Lin Feng. Ruoxie and the girl's eyes twinkled. Lin Feng was smart, and after they thought about it some more, they also thought that it was highly likely. Otherwise, how come the disciples of the emperor hadn't found anything anywhere in Xiang City? Of course, that's only a guess, but we can't put it aside, said Lin Feng after he saw that the two looked pensive. Indeed, that's possible, but even if the everlasting celestial emperor could get inside, we definitely can't. If the everlasting celestial emperor wanted to hide his palace, why do people say he was looking for a descendant? Asked Ruoxie. There were still some things they didn't understand. If the rumors are true, then there must be a way to get into the forbidden area, said Lin Feng. Therefore, I intend to wait here for the situation to change. Ruoxie, what do you want to do? I just came to gather experience, so I don't have anything specific in mind. Since you want to wait here, I'll stay here with you for a while. replied Ruoxie. Lin Feng and Ruoxie were under different situations. Lin Feng had received the everlasting celestial emperor's godly awareness, therefore he knew those things about the palace were true. Besides, he had communicated with the everlasting celestial emperor, which meant that he had chances to get into the palace, and de facto into the forbidden area. A few days later, Lin Feng was still waiting outside. At that moment, the Tianji sword penetrated the forbidden area again, but the scenery was the same. There were destructive starlights which forced him to pull back his sword immediately. Lin Feng recalled his sword and decided not to use it to find clues anymore. Instead, he went to a mountain range not far from the forbidden area to practice cultivation while dreaming. Time passed, and apart from Lin Feng, many people were waiting. Maybe they were like Lin Feng in that they had obtained 5 everlasting bronze plates and were sure that the great imperial everlasting palace was in the forbidden area. Around 20 days passed, and suddenly, a sound emerged from the forbidden area. It sounded like an elephant. An elephant sound again. Suddenly, many people opened their eyes. These elephant sounds were a regular occurrence that lots of people knew about. Lin Feng, who was practicing cultivation in a dream, suddenly opened his eyes and stood up. He looked at the forbidden area with curiosity. "I'm going to go see what that was." Lin Feng was convinced that something inside had changed. He unsheathed his Tianji sword, which streaked across the sky. As Lin Feng got closer, different kinds of strength surrounded his Tianji sword before it pierced through the mist and entered the forbidden area again. Inside, there were the same dazzling destructive lights, but there was also a rain of shooting stars. The Tianji sword rose up in the air, and suddenly, Lin Feng, who was outside, frowned. He saw a gigantic golden elephant which seemed capable of shaking the entire world. "That elephant is even larger than the stone ape," thought Lin Feng. That elephant was floating in the mid-air. People only had to stand outside the forbidden area. Even at the periphery, they could still see it. The most interesting part was that the elephant didn't seem like it wanted to leave. It seemed to be waiting for something. Maybe the everlasting celestial emperor sent that elephant, thought Lin Feng. The golden destructive lights were emanating from the elephant's nostrils. Maybe, if a cultivator managed to get on the elephant's back, then they wouldn't be assaulted by the destructive energies. Bzz. The Tianji sword shook violently and dodged a light. It had to leave again. It was on its way back as Lin Feng was thinking of what to do. Suddenly, Lin Feng frowned again as he saw a human being outside, who jumped into the forbidden area with incredible speed, landing on the elephant's back. The cultivator looked rather small compared to the elephant. A strong destructive wind kept blowing, and the Tianji sword kept dodging the energies. Lin Feng left it inside because he wanted to see what would happen with that cultivators. That elephant was probably a high-level imperial beast, maybe even stronger. Maybe it was a great imperial beast. Therefore, Lin Feng wanted to see if the elephant was going to attack the cultivator on its back or do something unexpected. The elephant seemed calm, and it didn't seem surprised to have a strong cultivator on its back. Slash, slash. The Tianji sword dashed out of the forbidden area. Should I try to get on his back too? Thought Lin Feng. Sharp sword lights appeared in his eyes as he thought. If he didn't get in, he'd regret. Lin Feng, said Ruoxie. He was wondering what Lin Feng was thinking. Ruoxie, there's a gigantic elephant inside. It's at least a high-level imperial beast, and it is attracting a lot of attention. Should we go inside together? Lin Feng asked. Ruoxie looked dumbstruck. A gigantic elephant, a high-level imperial beast, attracting people? He was as excited and as scared as Lin Feng. What do you want to do? Asked Ruoxie. I'm going in, said Lin Feng without hesitating. All right, I'm coming with you, said Ruoxie solemnly. He looked at the girl and asked, What about you? The girl's eyes twinkled as she thought about the difficult choice. She looked at Ruoxie in a meaningful way and said, I'm coming. All right, let's go then. It was their own choice. They all rose up in the air and flew towards the elephant's location, piercing through the mist. Then, Lin Feng unsheathed his Tianji sword again. Ruoxie, use your speed abstruse energy on my sword, said Lin Feng as he jumped onto his Tianji sword. Ruoxie and the girl followed him. They were all on the Tianji sword, surrounded by speed abstruse energies. Many people frowned as they watched them dive in. Chapter 1575. Limitless, 3 people at once. Many people's silhouettes flickered after they saw Lin Feng and the others jump in. Those 3 people weren't that strong, only 2 cultivators of the 9th Zun Qi layer and 1 of the 8th. They hadn't even broken through to the Huang Qi layer yet, but they dared go into the forbidden area. Nobody wanted to die, and Lin Feng wasn't an exception to this rule. This must mean that Lin Feng had discovered something. At that moment, Lu Yao and the others were there too. They watched as Lin Feng and the others went in. His heart was pounding, he was hesitating, but he really wanted to jump in too. I have to. Suddenly, Lu Yao turned into a sharp sword and jumped into the mist, risking his life. The crowd was surprised to see another person go in. They were still nervous themselves. Let's go, said some people. Lin Feng and the others were traversing the forbidden area. There was a strong wind, strong enough to scare them away if they hadn't seen someone succeed already. If Lin Feng had looked back, he would have seen just how many he had encouraged to jump in as well. Quickly enough, Lin Feng and the 2 others made it to the elephant's back. That elephant was as large as a castle, making all cultivators on its back look like ants. Terrifying lights surrounded the elephant's body, preventing the destructive energies from reaching them. More people are coming, thought Lin Feng when he saw silhouettes flickering behind him. Of course, some weaker people also came in and were immediately killed by the terrifying and destructive energies, leaving no traces of their bodies behind. The elephant is still not leaving, it's like it's waiting for more people, thought the crowd. They had gambled, and it seemed like it was working, the elephant was waiting for them. The wind spilled over and people could see it from outside. The cultivators who had remained outside saw so many of the others succeed, how could they control themselves? Especially emperors. They had to give it a try too. 2 hours later, there were more than 100 people on the elephant's back and the wind was getting scarier with each minute. Suddenly, the elephant trumpeted and finally, it started moving. The elephant turned around and shot out like a golden beam of light towards the depths of the mysterious forbidden area. Some people had just arrived at the forbidden area when the elephant leaving. They were furious. No. The inside of the forbidden area was gigantic. The gigantic elephant continued moving through the darkness as everyone gazed at the stars and moonlights. No wonder that people don't get out of the forbidden area. Without the elephant, everyone would have died, thought the crowd. Nobody disturbed one another. They just glanced around and looked pensive. Slash, slash. Terrifying sounds reverberated around them. The elephant was attacking the terrifying energies, leaving many people covered in a cold sweat. If the elephant was killed, they'd die too. They were now convinced that in there, even high-level emperors couldn't survive. Suddenly, the elephant trumpeted again, and golden lights flashed again. Golden marks appeared under the elephant's feet. What's that? Thought the crowd. Oh no, thought the crowd. A very powerful hurricane was heading towards them, filled with terrifyingly destructive energies. Bzz. Suddenly, the marks under the elephant's feet became dazzling. The crowd watched as the energies from the marks surrounded them. Golden lights appeared in their brain, just like an illusion. What a strange strength. That's a deployment spell, thought Lin Feng as he recalled Yen Di's deployment spells. Gotcha! Something broke. The crowd thought their bodies were breaking apart. They all started shaking violently, including Lin Feng. As the lights surrounded them, it seemed as if they had been teleported at the speed of light. Boom boom. Explosions sounded. Lin Feng feared that his body was going to explode. The pain from the deployment skill was severe. He felt disoriented, like he was being tossed around violently. Lin Feng finally stopped and tried to come back to his senses. He opened his eyes and saw stones all around him, even though there was almost no light to work with. Cliffs, thought Lin Feng as he rubbed his sore body. He rose up in the air and finally saw some lights. He was in a mountain range, surrounded by cliffs. He had crashed against some rocks a moment before, which would explain his pain. Lin Feng's mouth twitched as finally he understood what was going on. The forbidden area of Xixiang City was the entrance to a small world, but it was an incredibly dangerous entrance. Chapter 1576. Overly aggressive, he looked at the sky and around him, but there was nobody else there. It seemed like they had arrived from the sky. If this small world doesn't have another entrance apart from the one in Xixiang, then it's a lot more terrifying than the one I come from, whispered Lin Feng. From what Lin Feng understood, that elephant was a great imperial beast which could deploy powerful deployment spells. The elephant had to cast a deployment spell on all of them to protect them as they were thrown into a hole, which lead here. Compared to Lin Feng's small world, high-level emperors could rip through the sky to leave. But that probably wasn't the case for this world. Lin Feng thought for a few minutes before he started moving. He had to find people first, as he had lost Ruoxie and the others when they fell in. After a very long time, Lin Feng finally saw some palaces and temples. The buildings looked extraordinary, more so than anything found in Ba Huang or Jiuyu at least. Lin Feng accelerated and entered a palace. There were a lot of people there. He had looked around before and figured that the everlasting celestial emperor's palace was most likely in that place. Lin Feng glanced at the crowd below him. They were weaker than the cultivators he saw in the Great World, but stronger than most of the cultivators in Ba Huang. There were many Zun cultivators, but not that many of them were at the top of the Zun Qi layer. In fact, he hadn't seen a cultivator at the top of the Zun Qi layer yet. Lin Feng descended from the sky, landing in front of 3 young Zun cultivators. They seemed surprised to see Lin Feng there. Lin Feng looked unfathomable even though he wasn't releasing any qi. It must be a cultivator at the top of the Zun Qi layer, thought those people. The girl's eyes were twinkling as she looked at him in a cute way and asked, "What are you looking for, master?" "Have you ever heard of the everlasting celestial great emperor?" asked Lin Feng, rather straightforwardly. The everlasting celestial great emperor. Those 3 people shivered. "Master, we haven't," said the girl, shaking her head. She looked shy as she continued, "But I can take you somewhere where we can ask about it." Lin Feng looked handsome, he was very fast, his cultivation was unfathomable, and he had straightforwardly asked about a great emperor. The girl was shivering after just guessing what his cultivation must be. If she could make friends with him, she'd probably benefit for a lifetime. Maybe she could get some ancient scriptures with him. "Where? Take me there," said Lin Feng. "All right, come with me," said the girl to Lin Feng in a gentle way, stretching her beautiful, slender, white hand towards him. Cultivators were extremely determined, which was the same with this girl. She knew that if she didn't meet any strong cultivators that she would never find any ancient scriptures to study. Lin Feng was an opportunity in her eyes. "Shi Yao," said the 2 young men, both of them were surprised. Shi Yao smiled at them and said, "Go back to the sect and tell our teacher that I left with an extremely strong cultivator and that I don't know when I'll come back." Shi Yao held hands with Lin Feng and they both flew away. After the 2 young men watched Shi Yao and Lin Feng disappear from their fields of vision, they put on a rather upset face. They both liked her, but she had left with a stranger because he was stronger than them. Lin Feng and the girl jumped onto his Tianji sword and traveled very quickly, Shi Yao showing Lin Feng the way. Surprisingly, the girl leant against Lin Feng and asked, "What's your name, master?" "Lin Feng," said Lin Feng calmly. "Lin Feng, can I call you by your name?" "You can," said Lin Feng nodding. Shi Yao looked happy and smiled. "Lin Feng, how long have you been practicing cultivation? You must be a cultivator at the top of the Zun Qi layer, right?" "I've been practicing cultivation for about 10 years, said Lin Feng indifferently. Shi Yao was awestruck. Only 10 years? But Lin Feng hadn't replied to her question about whether he was a cultivator at the top of the Zun Qi layer, which probably meant that he was. She had been practicing cultivation for 20 years already, ever since she was a baby. "You must have incredible skills, techniques, and spells. I wish I had some ancient scriptures to work with. I would progress a lot faster," said Xiao. With that, she held Lin Feng's hand even tighter and wrapped her other arm around Lin Feng's back. She was acting straightforward with him as well. "If you can help me find what I'm looking for, I'll transmit some ancient scriptures to you," said Lin Feng calmly. His heart was as calm as still water, beauty didn't influence him. Xiao got very excited, but she also looked disappointed. Was she so bad at seducing men? Lin Feng didn't even glance at her. The Palace of Tyranny had been created long ago. Although they didn't have that many disciples, the few they had could be considered as leaders. Most of them were so strong that they were considered unfathomable by most. It was said that the first and second disciples were already cultivators at the very top of the Zunqi layer. It was also said that the tyrant, Master Ju Wu, had become an emperor 120 years before. Nobody knew how strong he was now. The Palace of Tyranny was the vastest and the strongest. Xiao was taking Lin Feng there. She also explained Lin Feng some things about it. Lin Feng was pensive. Outside the Palace of Tyranny, some disciples saw Lin Feng and Xiao arriving by a sword. They were both surprised. One of them even shouted, "Some people are coming." "I'm Lin Feng, I'm here to see Master Ju Wu," said Lin Feng. His voice rolled in waves as it traveled across the sky. "You dare arrive by sky? Put your sword away and come down, then give me your sword. If you want to see our master, you must respect our rules. You must kowtow 3 times and only then will I give you an opportunity to see my master," said a guard who was wearing Taoist robes. Lin Feng frowned. What kind of rules were those? Hand over his sword? Kowtow 3 times? An opportunity? Indeed, those are the rules, but for strong people, there are always exceptions. "I'll go talk to him," said Xiao in a low voice. She looked at those people and said, "We need to ask your master something. I hope you can understand." Xiao took out a ring and threw it at the guard. The guard smiled as he glanced at the ring, then he said, "If you want to go in, you must still give me your sword." "Umph." Lin Feng groaned coldly. That person was trying to steal his sword. Dazzling sword lights appeared, and Lin Feng shouted furiously, "I'm Lin Feng, I'm here to see Master Ju Wu." His voice spread far off into the distance this time. That person looked at Lin Feng in a cold way and shouted back, "How audacious! You dare disturb our people who are practicing cultivation. You must want to die." Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. He jumped forwards and released force which instantly surrounded that person's body. Then Lin Feng said in a cold way, "Piss off." The ground shook as that person was propelled away, causing him to cough up blood. His face turned deathly pale after he recovered himself. Lin Feng looked at him in a disdainful way as he said, "A doorman dares talk to me that." Chapter 1577, Great Emperor of the Universe. Inside the Palace of Tyranny, Lin Feng's voice spread far. Silhouettes rose up in the air and flew over to him. Xiao was startled as she looked at Lin Feng. She hadn't thought Lin Feng would be so aggressive. He even hurt someone outside the palace and disturbed everyone else. Lin Feng's robe fluttered in the wind as he started running forwards. The ground and the walls shook with each step he took. Marks trailed him even. "You dared cause trouble in the Palace of Tyranny? How reckless," said the guard who had been kicked away by Lin Feng. He landed far away, in the depths of the palace. He began moving back as he waited for some stronger cultivators to come. "Ridiculous." Lin Feng continued running forwards as released more force at the guard. He groaned with pain after Lin Feng released a gigantic hand which grabbed him. Then, Lin Feng landed in front of him again and stopped. That person's face turned deathly pale as he said, "I'm from the Palace of Tyranny, how dare you hurt me?" The gigantic hand assaulted him, causing him to cough up more blood, leaving his internal organs severely damaged. Finally, some people arrived and were glaring at Lin Feng. "Who are you? How dare you act recklessly in the Palace of Tyranny?" said one of them. It was a cultivator at the top of the Zunqi layer. "I'm Lin Feng, and I came to see your master. I didn't come to be humiliated by your stupid doorman. I just finished teaching him a lesson," said Lin Feng loudly. "He's insane and disrespectful, brother. Let's kill him," shouted the guard, his face now red. Lin Feng glanced at him, his mouth twitching. Lin Feng's eyes turned pitch black, and the guard's determination was suddenly lost. "How did he humiliate you?" asked the cultivator at the top of the Zunqi layer. Nobody had ever dared act recklessly in the Palace of Tyranny. But now, a cultivator of the 8th Zunqi layer had surprisingly dared. Besides, he said he wanted to see their teacher, even after he had injured their guard. Xiao's face turned pale. That cultivator was very strong. He was a cultivator at the top of the Zun Qi layer. Even if Lin Feng was strong, he probably couldn't deal with them. Master, Lin Feng doesn't understand the rules of the Palace of Tyranny. The guard said he wanted him to kowtow 3 times, so it infuriated him. He didn't mean what he did, explained Xiao. That person smiled coldly and said to Lin Feng, since it's that way, go out and kowtow 3 times, then you can piss off and we'll forget about all this. Xiao again looked petrified. She knew that Lin Feng wasn't going to kowtow, which meant that things were going to get worse. She suddenly regretted bringing Lin Feng there. Lin Feng glanced at him in a cold way before he jumped forwards. 2 gigantic hands appeared this time. They also contained terrifying demon lights and force. That cultivator was the 3rd disciple from the Palace of Tyranny, but even with his status, he looked horrified. He could tell how strong that attack was. He was worried that he was going to be crushed like a pancake. 8th Zun Qi layer, but how can he be so strong? Thought the 3rd disciple. He released as much energy and force as he could, and then put his hands in front of him to block. The people around them noticed that the 3rd disciple couldn't block Lin Feng, so lunged towards Lin Feng as well. The ground shook as Lin Feng's gigantic hands squished him. The 3rd disciple's face was turned red, his organs felt like they had exploded, and he softly fell to the ground. Piss off, shouted Lin Feng as he continued moving forwards. Everybody sensed death strength fill air around them, forcing them to stop. How strong! No wonder he despises the disciples from the Palace of Tyranny, thought Xiao looking at Lin Feng, blinking her beautiful eyes with astonishment. Lin Feng descended from the sky and landed next to the 3rd disciple. He said indifferently, I'm going to ask you something, and if you talk any more shit, I'll kill you. Lin Feng released death energy which instantly surrounded the 3rd disciple. Where is the great imperial everlasting palace in which the everlasting celestial emperor lived? Asked Lin Feng. His eyes were pitch black now, affecting the disciple's determination. The everlasting celestial emperor, the great imperial everlasting palace. That 3rd disciple was confused. He had never heard of such an emperor in the continent of the 9 clouds. I don't know, I've never heard of him, said the 3rd disciple, terrified. He didn't dare lie, he could die at any time, and Lin Feng had damaged his determination to boot. Who's the strongest cultivator in this continent, and who can cast the most powerful deployment spells? Asked Lin Feng. Emperor Dong controlled the Qi clan and the Qi Empire in Ba Huang and Jiuyu. Maybe the everlasting celestial emperor had another name in that small world. The great emperor of the universe, said that 3rd disciple. Indeed, it's the great emperor of the universe. He has the best deployment spells and cultivation in the continent of the 9 clouds, but he rarely shows himself in the continent of the 9 clouds. Everlasting celestial emperor, great emperor of the universe, whispered Lin Feng. Was that the same person? Where is the great emperor of the universe's palace? Asked Lin Feng. Inside the city of the universe, there is a palace of the universe, which must be where the great emperor of the universe lives. I don't know if that's what you're looking for though, said the 3rd disciple. At that moment, some strength suddenly appeared behind Lin Feng. Brothers, everybody looked at the arriving cultivators respectfully. They were both cultivators at the very top of the Zun Qi layer. They probably didn't have any enemies at the Zun level or below, especially one of them whose force was already multiplied by 1,000. Boom! The 2nd disciple ran forwards. His abstruse energy revealed itself to be Earth abstruse energy, which was at the maximum level. It was only a step away from becoming cosmic energy. Lin Feng rose up in the air and pushed Xiao behind him. Piss off, said Lin Feng. The 2nd disciple continued releasing Earth abstruse energy, seemingly throwing mountains at him. Those who try to block me will die, yelled Lin Feng. Suddenly, he released force which was multiplied by 1,000. The 2nd disciple suddenly looked petrified but tried to control himself. He has no enemies at the Zun Qi level as well, thought the 2nd disciple. Lin Feng took another step forward, causing the 2nd disciple's mouth to twitch. Suddenly, he moved aside and let Lin Feng pass. Who was insane enough to stop him? Lin Feng didn't even glance at him. Now there was someone else in front of him, the first disciple. He was the strongest one besides the emperor from that place. "You think you will leave alive?" said that person. Lin Feng continued moving forwards as a gigantic hand appeared above them, then he turned into an illusion. "Die!" The first disciple punched the air with not only a force multiplied by 1,000, but abstruse energy which was at its highest level. "Great earth destruction," said Lin Feng. He moved like the wind and punched the first disciple. Immediately after, the atmosphere became calm. Everybody was nervously staring at the fighters. Whoosh! Then, Lin Feng continued moving like the wind as he dragged Xiao with him, disappearing in the distance. The first disciple's body slowly crackled. Following some rumbling sounds, he exploded. Chapter 1578. The appearance of the palace. That first disciple was the strongest one there besides the emperor. Many people respected and admired him, but he died in such a tragic way. Just how strong was Lin Feng? Everyone inside the Palace of Tyranny watched as Lin Feng left. Their hearts were practically pounding out of their chests, their clothes were drenched in sweat. "That punch, the great earth destruction, was so powerful," whispered one of the cultivators. Lin Feng didn't care about what those people had to say. He got what he wanted and now he was out of there. The great emperor of the universe was the strongest cultivator in that small world. Was it too coincidental? 7 days later, Lin Feng was traveling on sword above the city of the universe. He had finally arrived. His robe was fluttering in the wind majestically. Xiao couldn't help but look at Lin Feng with admiration. All in all, Xiao couldn't understand Lin Feng. She didn't even know that her world was only a small part of the continent of the 9 clouds. It was just a small world which had existed for millions of years. She also didn't know that the real continent of the 9 clouds was actually beyond their world. Not only was Lin Feng mysterious, but he was also insensitive in her eyes. She had tried to seduce him many times, but it never worked. Lin Feng glanced around and noticed that the people there seemed stronger than where had been so far. Cultivators at the top of the Zunqi layer were normal there were even some emperors. However, Lin Feng didn't care about them. He had come for the great emperor of the universe. He wanted to see whether it was the everlasting celestial emperor. "Let's go to the great imperial palace," said Lin Feng. Then they began descending from the sky. As they descended, a Zun cultivator approached him and said, "Your Excellency." That cultivator had inspected Lin Feng. Figuring that he was probably a cultivator of the top of the Zunqi layer, he had decided to act respectful. "Could you please tell me where the Palace of the Universe is?" asked Lin Feng. "The Palace of the Universe again?" That cultivator was surprised. He looked at Lin Feng in a strange way and asked, "Why did you word it like that?" "Master, many people have come here for the Palace of the Universe, but I don't know why," said that person in a low voice. He pointed in the direction of the Palace of the Universe. Lin Feng rose up in the air again. He had many thoughts running through his mind. He wasn't the first one to make it here. The Palace of the Universe wasn't located in the central part of the City of the Universe, but rather on the periphery. It looked like a normal castle except that it looked endless. It was incomparably vast and tall. It was probably the largest building in that small world. Lin Feng arrived in front of the Palace of the Universe and sighed. "Everlasting" was written in golden letters at the entrance. The Great Imperial Everlasting Palace. That was the exact same palace he had seen when using the 5 everlasting bronze plates, but the illusion made it look much smaller. Everlasting. Xiao looked at the word and remembered that Lin Feng was looking for the everlasting celestial emperor. Was the everlasting celestial emperor Lin Feng was talking about the great emperor of the universe? "I found it," whispered Lin Feng. How many people got there before him though? Lin Feng was suddenly illuminated by lights. He glanced around and saw that many people were staring at him. Lin Feng even recognized some of them from the gigantic elephant. But even though they had already arrived, they were still standing outside, not daring to go inside. The everlasting celestial emperor's deployment spells were terrifying. His deployment spells had killed many, many people. Therefore, they didn't consider going inside. They were waiting for an opportunity, just like the elephant. It's him! Two people had recognized Lin Feng. Lin Feng turned around and saw Lu Yao and one of the young men with whom Lu Yao had come with. They thought that they were fast, but Lin Feng surprised them by arriving even faster. I want to get into the palace. You should wait for me here, but if you don't want to, you can just leave, said Lin Feng to Shi Yao. She looked at him and said, Lin Feng, you're insane. It's the great emperor of the universe's palace, people scared shitless to go in, and yet, you don't even think twice about it. No matter what she thought, Lin Feng had already started walking towards the palace. He had the everlasting celestial emperor's godly awareness, so he had to give it a try. Since the great emperor of the universe was probably the everlasting celestial emperor, why not try? Chapter 1579, Life and Death Path. Xiao wasn't the only one concerned, the others were all astonished too. Did he have a plan? It was said that the everlasting celestial emperor controlled 3,000 great deployment spells and 108,000 small deployment spells. He could protect the 10,000 things of creation with them. If he had cast those spells inside the palace, they would easily die. They were already outside the palace though, could they wait there forever? They had been waiting for someone to get in, and now Lin Feng was going in. Your Excellency, shouted someone at that moment. Lin Feng stopped and saw that it was an old man in a purple robe talking to him. He slowly walked towards him and smiled. The everlasting celestial emperor could cast terrifying deployment spells, yet you have only broken through to the 8th Zun Qi layer. Aren't you afraid to go in? Lin Feng looked at him in a calm and serene way but smiled. He knew that the old man was trying to learn where Lin Feng's confidence came from. Master, cultivation can be dangerous sometimes. But since the everlasting celestial emperor has left an unequal treasure here, I must try. Especially seeing how I'm here already, explained Lin Feng calmly. All right, I wouldn't have thought that there were such brave young men in this world. I'll follow you. Maybe we can help each other, said the old man smiling. In Lin Feng's eyes, the old man was just trying to leech. As you wish, master, said Lin Feng unperturbed. After you. You first, I'll follow you, that way I can protect you from behind, said the old man indifferently. Lin Feng nodded and smiled. Then he continued walking forwards. He knew that the old man was only using him as a guinea pig, but that cultivator was an emperor, and Lin Feng didn't know how strong he was. Since he knows something, let's follow him, said Lu Yao who was watching them. Then the young man and he followed Lin Feng. When the others saw that, they also followed. Once again, Lin Feng had convinced everyone to follow him. Lin Feng didn't care about them though. Phew! Lin Feng stepped in front of the gate and a dazzling golden light illuminated his body. Then suddenly he was in the palace. In front of Lin Feng were 4 doors. On each of them, something was written: heaven, earth, water, fire. The old man followed Lin Feng and looked at the 4 words as well. He smiled and said, Little friend, which one is the door we can cross without dying? Maybe all of them are safe, said Lin Feng. The old man smiled but Lin Feng continued, Of course, they could all be deadly as well. The old man didn't quite believe him, so he smiled again and said, The everlasting celestial emperor did this to attract people, so they couldn't possibly all be deadly. Which one is the right one, little friend? Any of them, said Lin Feng indifferently. Then he crossed the first door, which happened to be the one with the word heaven written above it. That young man is fearless. It seems like he doesn't realize we could obtain incredible things by following him, thought the old man. Although he was weary of Lin Feng, he still followed him. Let's go, said Lu Yao to the others following him. Almost everybody chose the heaven door. After crossing through, they were greeted with some stone steps which had 2 words written on them: life, death. There was a strange qi looming at the bottom of those stone steps. The path of death and life, assumedly one can live or die in the blink of an eye, thought the crowd. They all looked upset for they had heard about the life and death path before. It was a very dangerous deployment spell. Little friend, what should we do now? You seem to understand better than me, said the old man, smiling at Lin Feng. Master, I've never been here, so how could I know? Asked Lin Feng. The old man looked upset as he said, Little friend, you must be joking. You brought us here, so don't tell me you don't know how to pass through. Master, you willingly came with me, I didn't ask you to. Lin Feng reminded him. Umph. The old glanced at Lin Feng in a cold way and walked to the stone steps. Suddenly, he shook his hand and lights assaulted one of the steps which had the word, life, written on it. In a flash, a destructive light surrounded the stone steps and it lasted for 3 seconds before it disappeared. Those lights could have easily killed someone. The old man slowly turned around and smiled at Lin Feng. Little friend, don't you see? Lead the way, please. Lin Feng frowned. Even though he knew how to get through it, that old man was still using him a guinea pig. If Lin Feng hadn't received the great emperor's godly awareness, he would have died already. Master, this is the great emperor's palace. Thus, we must all collaborate instead of using one another as guinea pigs, said Lin Feng, remaining calm. He's right. Maybe we'll encounter even more dangers, so if we only use people as guinea pigs, none of us will succeed, reasoned another emperor. So what should we do, Your Excellency? Asked the old man to that person. I think there must be several ways to go about it. 10 deaths and no life, that is walk on the death, stone steps only, then you could step on 9 deaths and 1 life, etc. You just tried one, but we have yet to try the other ones, said that emperor calmly. Then, they bombarded a death stone step and found that nothing happened. 10 deaths, no life, that person reasoned. He continued attacking all the death stone steps, however, once he attacked the 10th one, destructive energies sprung up in the air. 9 deaths, 1 life. That's the only possibility, said the emperor slowly. He tried again and it worked. There must be an explanation to the deployment spell, thought Lin Feng, glancing at the emperor. Little friend, you go, said the old man in purple clothes, smiling. Lin Feng glanced at him and nodded. All right, I'll go first. Lin Feng moved quickly, stepping on 9 death stone steps and 1 life stone. Nobody dared to fly over. Since there were steps, it was implied that they must use them. We're safe, people's eyes were twinkling. Everybody, don't rush, otherwise you might die, said the old man, smiling. I'm going next. Then he climbed the stairs. He moved very quickly, however, Lin Feng released sword light suddenly. As if the old man had sensed something, his facial expression changed drastically as he screamed, What are you doing? Killing you. With that, Lin Feng attacked a death stone step. Try if you dare, shouted the emperor furiously. He stretched out his hand, however, Lin Feng's sword energies were too fast. Bzz, terrifying destructive energies filled the space. The old man gave a horrible shriek and was enveloped by those destructive lights. He glared at Lin Feng as he died. Don't think you're too smart, otherwise you'll die without even knowing how, mocked Lin Feng. Lin Feng turned around and walked towards the next door. Chapter 1580, Not Dead Yet? The everlasting celestial emperor had told Lin Feng, with his godly awareness, that all 4 entrances were viable, and that they were all deadly. The deployment spells didn't limit a cultivator off their cultivation level. Anyone who was weaker than the everlasting celestial emperor had a chance to die while facing them. Intelligence, wisdom, and luck were the key ingredients to passing these trials. Of course, without the great emperor's godly awareness, it would make it even more difficult to move through the palace. Lin Feng didn't know what there was at the center of the palace, so he remained cautious. I hope Ruo Xie won't enter this palace, thought Lin Feng. He had asked if Ruo Xie wanted to come with him because he figured they'd stay together. But now that Ruo Xie was apart from him, Lin Feng feared the worst. Of course, Lin Feng knew that Ruo Xie wasn't stupid. Ruo Xie wanted to gain experience, so he prioritized the everlasting celestial emperor's treasures less than the rest of them. Using the godly awareness as a key, Lin Feng had no problems crossing several doors, and everyone followed him. They didn't know that Lin Feng didn't need to do anything special to cross them. Those people were pleasantly surprised in fact. Lin Feng was their guide, and luckily he didn't seem to care about them as they followed along. He must be wise, thought the emperor who had agreed with him before. That place was seemingly endless. Lin Feng didn't cross all the doors with his fastest speed. It took him half a day to get to the center of the palace. Finally, he arrived before the last door he had seen in his memories. Lin Feng arrived in front of the door and saw some words in front of him. The earth and the sky, a waterfall, a mountain, precipices, a peak. That's... Lin Feng was astonished. There was a person sitting cross-legged as well. They weren't breathing, their heart wasn't beating, they looked like a statue in every way except for their lifelike appearance. That was the same person Lin Feng had seen in from the godly awareness. The everlasting celestial emperor. Godly awareness, thought Lin Feng. He sensed his godly awareness moving. Then a light shot out from his third eye. The godly awareness, Qi, moved towards the everlasting celestial emperor and penetrated his third eye. That's... Lin Feng was shaking. Lin Feng rose up in the air and landed on the peak. He wanted to get closer to the everlasting celestial emperor. Boom! A terrifying strength bombarded Lin Feng's body, making him fly away. Lin Feng's eyes were filled with sharp lights. That deployment spell was terrifying, it had prevented him from getting any closer a moment before. Is that the everlasting celestial emperor's actual body? Was his goal to have people bring him back his godly awareness? Thought Lin Feng. Lin Feng rose up in the air again while paying attention to the everlasting celestial emperor's body. Everybody was standing behind Lin Feng wondering who it was. Do you recognize him? Asked the emperor from the life and death stones. There's a powerful deployment spell on his body and it's invisible. You activated it so it attacked you. If I'm not mistaken, that must be the everlasting celestial emperor. I already know that I activated it, said Lin Feng. If that really is the everlasting celestial emperor, then this must be a monster of a puzzle, whispered the emperor. He then took out 3 everlasting bronze plates. Suddenly, a cloud emerged from them and moved towards the everlasting celestial emperor's physical body. If you have all of the everlasting bronze plates, then the everlasting celestial emperor's godly awareness will condense, said Lin Feng. Look at that mountain, said the emperor, pointing at something. Everything was moving, some cultivation caves appeared, and several deployment spells formed. Let's go. Everyone that was following Lin Feng moved towards the cultivation caves. They had followed him until now, so it was finally time to seize some opportunities. Lin Feng didn't follow them. There were so many caves and he wasn't in a rush. Those caves were probably made for practicing cultivation though. Master, what do you think? Lin Feng asked the emperor. I don't know either. We can go in and see though, said the emperor smiling. Lin Feng nodded and went to the mountains. However, someone suddenly rushed out of a cave looking terrified. It was a Taoist monk. That Taoist monk looked at Lin Feng and laughed. Little bastard. You're not dead yet. You old bastard. How could I die while you're still alive? Lin Feng said. How come that damn Taoist monk always appeared where good things were? Chapter 1581. Deployment spell. That Taoist monk was Yen Di, of course. Lin Feng found it difficult to find the everlasting celestial emperor's palace, but Yen Di was already there and had probably been there for a while now. Even though they hadn't seen each other for 2 years, they were still close. You bastard, long time no see, you're still not a medium-level emperor? Asked Lin Feng. Yen Di rolled his eyes and said, do you think cultivating imperial levels are similar to the Xian or Tianqi layers? The continent of the 9 clouds is extremely vast. Breaking through to the Huangqi layer is already difficult. Some people need hundreds or even thousands of years to break through to the Huangqi layer, said Yen Di. Lin Feng smiled. He was just joking with Yen Di. Even in places like Ba Huang and Jiuyu, where there were billions of people, there were very, very few emperors. And in the Great World, the reason why there were so many emperors was because there were trillions and trillions of people. Nobody knew exactly how many people there were because nobody had ever tried to count. How long have you been here and what did you find in those buildings? Lin Feng asked. I've been here for a year already. Concerning what you can find in those buildings, you can go and enjoy it for yourself. They're only good things, said Yen Di. Then he suddenly narrowed his eyes and looked at the everlasting celestial emperor. He looked surprised as he said, don't waste time. Study, maybe the same thing that happened to me also happened to him. Lin Feng nodded. He understood what Yen Di meant. Maybe that the everlasting celestial emperor was going to come back to life after all his godly awareness were brought back to him. Go, said Yen Di to Lin Feng. He didn't want to waste time talking about the past with Lin Feng. Since Lin Feng was alive and had come himself, he had to enjoy the benefits that place offered. Yen Di then went to another building. Lin Feng listened to his advice and went to the building from which Yen Di had just come out of. Suddenly, a curtain of light appeared and closed the room off. Some strange marks appeared in front of Lin Feng, seemingly creating a seal. The room wasn't big, just large enough to practice cultivation. Lin Feng turned around and touched the curtain of light which had closed the room and found that it was quite thick. It seemed like he was stuck inside now. Lin Feng attacked the curtain with energies, but it felt like he was striking diamonds. Lin Feng condensed strength in his fist, creating a strong wind. Great earth destruction. Lin Feng attacked the wall. He had even amazed the great earth demon ape with that attack, but this curtain of light didn't budge. On top of that, a terrifying strength counterattacked and bombarded him. He was propelled backwards and violently crashed against the wall behind him. That bastard didn't tell me about that, thought Lin Feng. He didn't continue trying. The counterattack was too terrifying. Even Yen Di was probably unable to break that curtain of light. Lin Feng walked to the marks and sat down cross-legged. Once he did, the marks around him started flashing even faster. Lin Feng was surprised, but he closed his eyes. Since Yen Di had managed to come out, it probably had something to do with those marks. The lights revolved around Lin Feng's head, causing the atmosphere in the cave to change. It became dazzling, leaving Lin Feng the impression that he was in a large space. The numerous marks and words floated around him before penetrating his head. Those marks and words became a part of his memories. Deployment. A gigantic word appeared in front of Lin Feng. Deployment. Lin Feng relaxed and let the memories and the marks fill his head. After what seemed to be a long time and countless memories, Lin Feng realized that he had received one of the 3,000 great deployment spells. Deployment spells use the strength of the earth and the sky, whispered Lin Feng. Although people's strength was limited, the strength of the earth and sky was unlimited. Weaker cultivators borrowed external strength to cast deployment spells, just as Yen Di had in the past when he used abstruse crystals or weapons. But those in the memories didn't need to borrow external strength. They could use their own strength to attract the strength from the earth and sky to carve holy marks and cast terrifying deployment spells. Of course, the more powerful the deployment spell was, the more time they needed. Chapter 1582. Action deployment spells were created from the use of many ancient words. Lin Feng had studied holy marks before, but he knew that his holy marks were rudimentary at best. Each stroke was incredible and mysterious, and he had never really understood the connections between marks, holy marks, and deployment marks. To carve authentic holy marks and use holy marks' special powers, cultivators had to understand all sorts of marks. They had to understand which kind of strength was appropriate. Even the slightest mistake in the type of strength could weaken a deployment spell by a lot. Of course, authentic deployment spellcasters' knowledge couldn't be restrained to 3,000 great deployment spells and 108,000 small deployment spells. That was only an expression. Authentic deployment spellcasters could cast an infinite number of deployment spells. What the everlasting celestial emperor had implied with his expression, 3,000 and 108,000 deployment spells, was that if a cultivator could manage to cast them all, then they'd be able to cast any deployment spell in the world. Lin Feng familiarized himself with the memories he just received. From this ocean of memories, he needed to select drops of it at a time to understand them, one by one. In the end, he had to think of all these drops as a whole and create waves with them. Besides, deployment spells were different from one person and another because they depended on the type of cosmic energies a cultivator understood. Depending on the type of strength used, deployment spells could have entirely different results. For example, if a cultivator wanted to create a cage using the arts of deployment spells, the best energy to use was earth energy. To make people feel drowsy, the best energy to use was illusion energy. And so on. It seems like casting powerful deployment spells requires a cultivator to control several types of abstruse energies or cosmic energies. I wonder how many types of energies the everlasting celestial emperor controlled? Thought Lin Feng. To get out of here, I must cast a shattering deployment spell. Lin Feng suddenly realized. A shattering deployment spell was used to break through things. It was one of the 3,000 great deployment spells and was most effectively used with earth abstruse or cosmic energy. Lin Feng's mouth twitched. He had to understand and control a deployment spells to get out? Were all the rooms like that? How many people would be stuck in those rooms? Lin Feng shivered. The everlasting celestial emperor was a bit cruel. Understanding and casting a deployment spell was easier said than done. People who slow to learn would be stuck for dozens or even hundreds of years in there. Of course, that was a test and people had to be determined if they wanted to reap the benefits. One of the 3,000 great deployment spells, I'm going to be stuck inside for a while I think, thought Lin Feng smiling wryly. He was worried that if it took him too long to understand the deployment spell, his cultivation wouldn't improve as fast as he'd like. But deployment spells were powerful too. Even if he hadn't been stuck inside, would he have considered giving up this treasure? A shattering deployment spell could break through countless things. It might even be stronger than all of his current attacks. Besides, he could use deployment spells for anything, to practice cultivation, to fabricate weapons, and to concoct pills. Back then, Yendi had cast Holy Mark's deployment spell in Tianqi's snowy mountains using abstruse energies from the qi of the earth and sky. Now, Tianqi's snowy peaks had become a holy cultivation place. Lin Feng remained in the room, studying the varying words and marks. Even though his eyes were closed, his hands were moving silently in the air. He was carving words in the air, causing a mysterious strength to form. Lin Feng used immortal abstruse energy to carve those words, which allowed them to remain longer than they normally would. A month later, Lin Feng was still carving marks with his fingers. His marks were connecting and could condense into holy mark strength. His power to learn was monstrous, but he didn't stop. Holy marks constituted the base for the 3,000 great deployment spells and the 108,000 small deployment spells, but it was too much to take in with a short time. Yendi had practiced using marks for a long time before. It wouldn't surprise Lin Feng if he had practiced using them for over 100 years. 6 months passed, but Lin Feng was as determined as ever. All he thought about were deployment spells and nothing else could distract him. There was a small deployment spell in front of Lin Feng already. If other people knew his progress, they would probably vomit from anger. A strong deployment spellcaster had been where Lin Feng was now and had learnt one of the 3,000 great deployment spells from the everlasting celestial emperor. He had practiced and studied diligently for 10 years and in the end, he had only managed to understand 10% of it. 1 year passed before Lin Feng finally let his hands rest at his side. He sighed before he opened his eyes, looking disappointed. "It's been 1 year already," whispered Lin Feng. In 1 year, he hadn't done anything but study deployment spells. That shattering deployment spell was so hard to cast. How long would he need? He was still stuck carving tiny deployment spells. Actually, Lin Feng was doing great. In another cave, Lu Yao had already given up. He didn't continue practicing deployment spells but had decided to practice cultivation instead. He was worried that it would take 10 years to practice deployment spells to a point where he could leave. He lost all his self-confidence and had decided to become an emperor with that time. Maybe he could break that curtain of light after becoming an emperor. Chapter 1583. 3 years during that year, many people had entered the forbidden area of Xiong and appeared in the small world. They eventually found the great emperor's palace. The great emperor of the universe was the best cultivator in that small world, so it was easy to guess that the everlasting celestial emperor and the great emperor of the universe were the same person. It was also easy to recognize that it was the great imperial everlasting palace after seeing his castle. Rumors circulated in the outside world concerning the forbidden area, the everlasting celestial emperor being linked. Of course, nobody knew that the elephant which brought them to the small world was also the beast that created the destructive energies. And in the process of taking them to the small world, it would throw them violently and randomly inside. Also, nobody knew that the elephant was choosing the people who entered. Nobody knew how many people survived when entering the forbidden area. However, Lin Feng didn't know about what was going on in the great world. At that moment, he was frowning. He breathed in and whispered, "Rigor and precision are the most important concepts when casting deployment spells because if you make a mistake, you lose everything." Lin Feng's hand shook as he used immortal energies to carve more marks. He didn't try to carve the small deployment spells anymore, he had started all over again. After a long time, some marks moved in a strange way, letting him heave a sigh of relief. Lin Feng didn't stop though, and he continued carving. The deployment marks seemed countless. All the marks were connecting and moving properly this time. Yan Di could already do that, thought Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't try to do what the everlasting celestial emperor had taught him, he was trying to understand things beyond their foundations. He failed many times but started up again each time. Outside, seasons passed. Lin Feng had already spent 3 years in the great imperial everlasting palace. He had never needed so much time to understand something before. At that moment, almost half of the caves were closed. Countless people had come to that small world, but the difficult part wasn't getting there, it was leaving. In one of those caves, a strong cultivator from the palace of the gods opened his eyes and looked dumbstruck. He whispered, "At the palace of the gods, we're experts at deployment spells. I used to think that our deployment spells were incredible, but now I realize how ridiculous I was. The everlasting celestial emperor's deployment spells are terrifying. I don't even know how long I'll need to get out of here. Luckily, I didn't bring Xianchen. It might take me 100 years to get out of here." In a room next to him, there was a young man who was fixedly staring at the stone door. He was a young man from a very big family in Xiang City. He was an adept at deployment spells, and he was a low-level emperor already. However, he found it extremely difficult to study the everlasting celestial emperor's deployment spells. He had no problem with the basics, but to make them turn into deployment spells was another world of difficulty. He didn't know how long it'd take him to succeed. These are just a few examples of the trapped cultivators there. Many strong cultivators were even many high-level emperors, and had been inside for 3 years already, but they had the feeling they wouldn't master the deployment spell anytime soon. There was only one exception. He was wearing a Taoist robe and was popping in and out of caves seemingly effortlessly. In just 3 years, he had already been in 10 caves. He understood them easily and his deployment spells improved. He could already imagine himself having studied the 3,000 great deployment spells. Back at the Great World, outside of Xiang City, there were many people resting on a mountain range. After 2 years without hearing anything from those inside, the elephant trumpeted once more, but none of them knew how to get in. Chi Yuchen was amongst them, but he looked dispirited as well. After 3 years of not hearing back from one person who entered, he was beginning to believe that he made the right choice in not jumping in. Instead, during those 3 years, he had practiced cultivation diligently and had become even stronger. He would soon become an emperor. He was considering going back to Qingdi Mountain and practicing cultivation there. It seems like I'm not as talented as when Ao Feng, it's no wonder that our teacher prefers him, thought Chi Yuchen, standing up. When Ao Feng had broken through to the Huang Qi layer 3 years before, but Chi Yuchen had been stuck at the same level since. He wasn't the only one, Zhou Tianrua and the others were all in the same boat, stuck at the very, very top of the Zunqi layer. However, Chi Yuchen wasn't sad. He knew just how difficult it was to become an emperor. There was a gigantic difference between the Zunqi layer and the Huang Qi layer. If only he had fate seeds, then he could break through to the Huang Qi layer easily. But he had decided that he didn't to use them, he wanted to rely on himself to overcome this obstacle. Lin Feng, back then you had broken through to the 8th Zunqi layer, and you were an extremely good fighter, but you probably haven't broken through to the Huang Qi layer yet. I guarantee you I will break through to the Huang Qi layer before you, thought Chi Yuchen, feeling determined. He thought that he had been stuck at the top of the Zunqi layer because Lin Feng had influenced him back then. Chapter 1584. The great emperor in cyan clothes. It was at that moment that Lin Feng finally opened his eyes. He moved his hands with incredible precision, causing the space around him to distort more and more. Break! Lin Feng shook his hand and a terrifying strength crashed onto the light curtain. The cave shook as energies bounced back and crashed onto Lin Feng's body, making him strike the back of the cave again. My deployment spell is not explosive enough. I can't break the door with just that strength, thought Lin Feng, shaking his head. He was a bit disappointed. If a powerful deployment spellcaster had been there with him, they would have been extremely pissed off if they heard him. In just 3 years, Lin Feng could already start casting powerful deployment spells. I wonder if I will ever get out. Lin Feng slowly walked towards the light curtain again. He put his hands on it and marks appeared once more. The marks flashed as he infused strength into them. Lin Feng didn't stop as he released abstruse strength into the light curtain. He also released immortal qi, making the marks become even more distinct. Lin Feng performed 1,000,000 movements, filling the marks with 1,000,000 shattering words. Lin Feng moved back and performed one last hand seal. Dazzling lights illuminated the cave and then a terrifying strength surfaced. The light curtain broke apart and the door slowly opened itself. The lights from outside slowly filled the cave, shining upon Lin Feng. 3 years. Lin Feng came out and glanced around. Even though he didn't know if the sky there was fake or real, seeing sunlight again felt extremely pleasant. He had never practiced something for that long before. During those 3 years, the outside world had changed. Maybe those who used to be cultivators at the very top of the Zunqi layer had already broken through to the Huangqi layer. Lin Feng left the cave. He considered that that cave was the shattering deployment spell cave. What did the 299 others look like? Lin Feng glanced around and looked for another empty cave. He wanted to try another one. Boom, boom. At that moment, a terrifying strength launched towards him. He thought he was going to suffocate under that strength. He frowned and glanced around. What was going on? Kaboom! The strength became even more terrifying. It was as if the space around him was going to collapse. Was someone attacking the great emperor's palace? If that was the case, they must be extremely strong. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who felt that. Everybody there did, even those who were practicing inside the caves. However, after the palace shook twice, the atmosphere became calm again. The calm was misleading as a terrifying strength moved around the palace, causing even the mountains to break apart. The peak on which the everlasting celestial emperor was sitting also broke apart. Lin Feng heard some sounds coming from the sky, making him wonder if it was going to collapse. Gigantic craters and canyons appeared. Fissures appeared in the sky and finally, the sky broke apart. The outside world appeared in Lin Feng's field of vision. There was someone standing above them. They looked both proud and arrogant. That person was wearing a cyan robe and his gaze was sharp. He was fixedly staring at the everlasting celestial emperor's physical body. That person seemed to be 30 years old, but looks could be deceiving. A great emperor! Lin Feng was astonished. That cultivator in the cyan robe was a great emperor, otherwise, he couldn't possibly have destroyed the great emperor's palace. At that moment, whistling sounds appeared as the earth and the sky shook violently. It was the elephant who had appeared above them. "You stupid animal! You think you can throw me inside?" said the young man. He shook his hand and golden lights flashed. Then a gigantic ball of light appeared, seemingly containing an infinite number of marks in the form of a deployment spell. "Piss off!" The golden light streaked across the sky and assaulted the elephant, crushing him. Right after, everything around them became chaotic. It was as if the earth and sky were going to fall apart. The gigantic elephant was propelled away. The young man jumped forwards and landed before the everlasting celestial emperor's physical body. He said in a cold way, "You didn't go too far to hide. Surprisingly, you were hiding in a small world. What a pity for you. Did you think that the forbidden area of Xixiang could stop me? Your most outstanding disciple." That young man's hand moved towards the physical body as he released a terrifying strength which seemed like it could destroy anything. But as that strength swept forward, some lights appeared around the great emperor's physical body. The great emperor in cyan robe frowned, but then smiled coldly. Your deployment spells are still quite strong. I wonder when you carve them? But don't forget that in terms of deployment spells, I'm even stronger than you. You probably understand that in front of me, you have no chance to escape. Sense the power of my shattering deployment spell. Is it stronger than yours? Said the young man. He took a step backwards and condensed golden strength. It wasn't earth strength like Lin Feng would have thought. After seeing that the great emperor was going to unleash an incredible attack, Lin Feng ran away. Lin Feng made it far off in the distance before that great emperor in the cyan robes finished condensing his strength into a deployment spell. It wasn't finished quite yet, but it still looked terrifying. Break, said the great emperor in the cyan robe. He looked arrogant, proud, and confident in his strength. His shattering deployment spell crashed onto the emperor's physical body. Although his attack looked tiny, he purposely used as little space as possible to create an attack which was as powerful as possible. He wasted neither time nor energy this way. Kaboom! A loud bang sounded. The physical body cracked apart, making the great emperor in the cyan robe smile coldly. Oh no! However, at that moment, the great emperor's facial expression changed drastically. Surprisingly, his great deployment spell bounced back at him. Energies evolved and rose to the skies before they attacked the great emperor in the cyan robe. He tried to escape, but it was already too late. He was imprisoned, and the energies crashed against his body. The great emperor in cyan clothes was propelled into the ground. His face turned deathly pale. He knew that even if he used a powerful defensive spell, the energies would still lacerate him. Evolution. How is that possible? Surprisingly, your deployment spell can evolve. The great emperor in the cyan clothes was stupefied. The everlasting celestial emperor's physical body hadn't moved this whole time. However, he suddenly opened his eyes. He wasn't breathing, his heart wasn't beating, but his eyes resembled those of a living being. Chapter 1585, Everlasting Transmission. Why couldn't it be possible? Don't forget that I'm your teacher, and I'm the one who transmitted those deployment spells to you, said the everlasting celestial emperor calmly. Everybody thinks that you are an extremely talented deployment spellcaster, but what people don't know is that you stole the holy emperor's deployment spells. That's how you became the everlasting celestial emperor. Don't think that I don't know about that. If you transmitted all your knowledge to me with my natural abilities, I should be stronger than you, said the great emperor in the cyan clothes. The gigantic elephant had returned and landed next to the everlasting celestial emperor. It was looking at the great emperor in the cyan clothes in a cold way. The everlasting celestial great emperor raised his hand, causing marks to appear. All the caves suddenly opened, and their prisoners came out. However, they were shocked to see the everlasting celestial emperor fighting someone. Do you regret having ever called me teacher? As a teacher, maybe I could forgive you and transmit you my final knowledge, said the everlasting celestial emperor calmly. Surprisingly, the great emperor in cyan clothes looked at him in a disdainful way and said, "You are not even complete. Do you actually believe that you can defeat me? Since it's that way, just forget it," said the everlasting celestial emperor. Then he released his godly awareness, which turned into 1,000,000 beams of light. They moved towards the third eyes of everyone who had just appeared. The great emperor in cyan clothes frowned after he witnessed this. He then asked, "What are you doing? Maybe some of these people will receive everything I know. Maybe it will only be one person, maybe two. Of course, maybe none of them have received anything. Will you chase them or myself?" asked the everlasting celestial emperor, smiling. Suddenly, from under his feet, a terrifying light mark appeared. Buzzing sounds vibrated before the everlasting celestial emperor suddenly disappeared. What a schemer! The great emperor in cyan clothes looked furious. He quickly raised his hand and grabbed the two people closest to him. He released his godly awareness and dived into their memories. Nothing. He shook his hand and their bodies exploded. He then threw the rest of their flesh and bones away. After that, he ran towards the everlasting celestial emperor. Although he wanted to inspect everybody's memories, he figured that the everlasting celestial emperor hadn't actually sent anything to anyone. Therefore, he could only attack the everlasting celestial emperor. "Come here," said the gigantic elephant. The crowd was startled to see that incredible elephant talking to them, but they all jumped onto the elephant's back. The elephant wanted to take them back now. Lin Feng's silhouette flickered, and he jumped onto the elephant, but he was frowning. Ruoxie had also come to that small world, and now that elephant was leaving. How could Ruoxie make it back without the elephant? The earth and sky shook as the gigantic elephant then rose up in the air. "Emperor!" Lin Feng saw Yendi's silhouette flicker before he disappeared. Surprisingly, he wasn't going back with the elephant. "I have things to do. Take care of yourself," said Yendi loudly. Then he disappeared. Those who were outside of the palace had watched as the elephant rose up in the air, still trying to comprehend everything that had happened. A moment before, someone had attacked the great emperor of the universe's palace, and now the elephant was leaving with so many people on its back. When had so many people entered the palace? "Master Elephant, can you wait a second?" shouted Lin Feng. He finally saw Ruoxie, who was currently releasing acceleration abstruse energy to madly catch up, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't catch up with the elephant. The gigantic elephant suddenly moved back down, and the remaining people from the outside world jumped onto the elephant's back, including Ruoxie and the girl. Xiao saw Lin Feng on the elephant's back. Lin Feng had been looking for the everlasting celestial emperor's palace for a long time, but was it really the great emperor of the universe's palace? Just where was Lin Feng from? She had to hide for the past 3 years because those people from the Palace of Tyranny had chased her. They were looking for her and Lin Feng to get their revenge. She had come back just a year before and had waited there for Lin Feng. And now he was leaving on this elephant's back? "Xiao," said Lin Feng, throwing a ring at her from the elephant's back. "He's leaving." Xiao caught the ring as he disappeared. The elephant pierced through the sky, but just where was that gigantic elephant going? "Is there something in the sky?" thought Xiao. She was starting to have doubts about her own world. Even though Lin Feng had pierced through the sky, the situation was still dangerous. Back in Xixiang, they were brought back to the Forbidden Area, an area filled with destructive energies. The gigantic elephant rose up in the air, but the destructive energies continuously assaulted the protective layer around it. Many holes started to form, and many people died from the energies which snuck through. But the elephant used its full strength to get through the most dangerous part. Even though the worst was over, the remaining crowd on the elephant's back were still scared shitless. "Lin Feng, did you go into the palace?" asked Ruoxie to Lin Feng using telepathy. If Lin Feng hadn't told the elephant to wait, it would have left without him. Even though it wasn't a great effort for the elephant, for those on the ground, it was a life-saving feat. "I did." It really was the everlasting celestial emperor's palace. There were 81 traps inside and many people died. After those 81 tests, I got to the center of the palace where there were 3,000 caves from which you could learn the 3,000 great deployment spells of the emperor. The everlasting celestial emperor and his 3,000 great deployment spells. Ruoxie's eyes twinkled as he thought about it. "If you obtained any deployment spells, then that's great." "I didn't get any," said Ruoxie laughing. He didn't mind, he couldn't have gotten in anyways. Ruoxie didn't know that so many people had regretted entering those caves because they had been stuck inside for such a long time. It's good for those who survived. During those 3 years, you've already reached the very top of the Zunqi layer. You'll soon break through to the Huangqi layer. Look at me, I'm still stuck at the same level as when I entered this small world," said Lin Feng, still using telepathy. He didn't mind though, he was excited rather. Not only had he obtained a deployment spell, but in the thread of godly awareness that the great emperor and sent everyone, he had also obtained 3,000 great deployment spells. Lin Feng had already practiced for 3 years, but that was nothing, especially after breaking through to the Huangqi layer. But the everlasting celestial emperor's skills were priceless. Chapter 1586. Going back to the great world at that moment, Lu Yao arrived next to Lin Feng and Ruoxie. He looked at Lin Feng and smiled indifferently. Lin Feng, after 3 years you're still a cultivator of the 8th Zun Qi layer. You must have made great progress in terms of deployment spells, I suppose? Lin Feng glanced at Lu Yao and smiled coldly. I'm all right. I'm all right, thought Lu Yao, groaning coldly. The everlasting Celestial Emperor's great deployment spells were incredible, and yet Lin Feng dared say, I'm all right? That must have meant that he had wasted the last 3 years trying to understand them, even though it was impossible to understand them in such a short time. Lin Feng was ridiculous. Lu Yao had spent half a year trying to understand deployment spells before he realized that it was too difficult. At that time, he stopped and decided to practice cultivation. He wasn't far from breaking through to the Huang Qi layer anymore. He was confident that with his level of sword cultivation, he could now easily kill the person he used to be 3 years before. On the other hand, Lin Feng hadn't progressed at all. He just wasted time trying to understand deployment spells which were impossible to understand in such a short time. For Lu Yao, those deployment spell memories were priceless treasures which had nothing to do with cultivation. Lu Yao sat down next to Lin Feng as if they were friends, seemingly forgetting that they had wanted to fight in the past. Lin Feng, your sword cultivation is incredible. Back then, you could have easily defeated me, but now you've wasted so much time trying to understand deployment spells. It's a pity because most emperors can't necessarily understand deployment spells, let alone us Zun-level cultivators, said Lu Yao calmly. Lin Feng looked amused. He smiled at Lu Yao and said, Are you done talking? Lu Yao was angry on the inside, but he didn't show it on the outside. How could Lin Feng remain so calm and even make fun of him? There's no way he'd progressed these last 3 years. Yes, I am, said Lu Yao, nodding. All right, if you're done talking shit, piss off. Get away from me, said Lin Feng. Lu Yao stood up and groaned coldly. When we go back to the Great World, we'll have to exchange views on sword cultivation, Brother Lin. After Lu Yao said that, he walked away. Lin Feng didn't even glance at him as he left. Lin Feng didn't care about him at all. The girl next to Ruoxie, Lu Yao's fellow disciple, looked at Lin Feng with her beautiful eyes, amazed. Little friend, said an emperor coming to Lin Feng at that moment. That was the emperor he had met in the palace where they were going through all the traps. Lin Feng remembered that guy was rather nice, unlike the emperor in green clothes whom Lin Feng had killed. Master, said Lin Feng, nodding. The emperor smiled and said, Little friend, don't call me master, it makes it sound like we didn't know each other. Call me Muyi. I must show respect because you're older than me. I'll call you Master Muyi then, said Lin Feng, smiling politely. All right, little friend, you haven't leveled up during the last 3 years, so you must have been studying deployment spells? Muyi asked Lin Feng. Unlike Lu Yao, he knew that Lin Feng was smart. He even watched him kill an emperor with his sword. Because he knew that Lin Feng was smart, he knew that Lin Feng couldn't have possibly wasted his time in the palace. This led him to believe that Lin Feng had dedicated the whole time to deployment spells. The results were insignificant, but I now have a deeper appreciation of deployment spells, said Lin Feng modestly. The results hadn't been insignificant at all. Apart from Yan Di, he was the only one who had managed to learn one full deployment spell. That was why the everlasting Celestial Emperor had transmitted all the deployment spells to him. What a show-off, thought Lu Yao after he heard Lin Feng. He must have learnt something while he was there. Muyi was pleasantly surprised. Lin Feng had understood one of the 1,000 great deployment spells, that by itself was amazing and could qualify him as a real genius. Little friend, I also learnt some things. When we get out, can we exchange views on deployment spells? We can even spend some time together. What do you think? Asked Muyi while smiling at Lin Feng. He thought Lin Feng was extraordinary, so befriending him before he became stronger could only benefit him. Lin Feng noticed that Muyi's eyes were twinkling. It was always good to have an emperor as a friend, but Lin Feng didn't know what that guy had in mind. Even though Lin Feng thought Muyi was respectful and nice so far, traveling with him might be a risk. If Muyi became aggressive, Lin Feng wouldn't stand a chance. Besides, Lin Feng didn't know how strong Muyi really was, just that he was interested in deployment spells. Muyi doesn't know that I received all of the deployment spells from the everlasting Celestial Emperor. Apart from that, I know nothing which could be interesting to an emperor, thought Lin Feng. He smiled and nodded. That would be a pleasure, Master Muyi. Ha, great, I also learned some stuff. This way we can both learn from each other, said Muyi. He was very happy that Lin Feng had accepted. Lu Yao grew even more upset after he heard Lin Feng and Muyi talking. He wanted to fight Lin Feng when they got back, but now an emperor might interfere. While this was happening, everyone was still surrounded by destructive energies. The elephant was inhaling and exhaling them as they neared the entrance to the forbidden zone. After a while, they arrived at the periphery of the forbidden area and the gigantic elephant stopped. Let's go, after you get out, leave Xiang City as fast as possible, said the gigantic elephant. Then, people's silhouettes flickered out. A lot of people were eyeballing Lin Feng and the others after they left the forbidden area. During those 3 years, many more people had heard about the forbidden area, and they came, but because they hadn't heard about the elephant, they were at a loss as to what to do. They came out, thought the crowd. Surprisingly, people had made it out alive from the forbidden area. On top of that, there wasn't just a few of them, but a crowd. Whoosh! People moved like the wind and landed in front of those who had just come out of the forbidden area. Some emperors in the sky looked down at them and asked indifferently, "Where did you go? Did you find the emperor's palace?" The emperor's palace is in the forbidden area, but it's been destroyed. A great emperor came and destroyed it, said Muyi calmly. The palace was destroyed? The crowd was shocked. Lu Yao Ruoxia Lin Shui, said an emperor at that moment. He was probably a strong cultivator from Sword Mountain because he had an ancient-looking sword resting on his back. Then he said to them, "Come with me." "All right," Lu Yao said while nodding. Then he followed. He was safe with that elder, which was important right now because some people wanted to know more about the emperor's palace, so everyone who just escaped were probably in danger. Ruoxia nodded at Lin Feng and then left with Lin Shui. Sword Mountain had some powerful emperors, so nobody tried to prevent them from leaving. "Let's go as well," said Muyi to Lin Feng. He was strong enough as well, so nobody would try to stop them. The crowd glanced over the remaining people, especially those who were weaker or didn't belong to a powerful group. At that moment, in the distance, gigantic waves of qi rolled in waves. Muyi looked surprised and frowned and accelerated. Many people in the surroundings did the same and accelerated. Those who just left the forbidden area can't leave, that's an order from the everlasting palace, said an extremely loud voice. Muyi and everybody else were startled. However, Muyi and the other emperors accelerated away. Only stupid people would have stopped. "An order from the everlasting palace?" asked Lin Feng. "Did it have to do anything with the everlasting celestial emperor?" After the everlasting celestial emperor fell, his disciple rebuilt the everlasting palace, but he rebuilt in another territory in Xiang City. The one who had attacked the palace probably informed people from the outside world, so this would be them. Unfortunately for them, they were slower than us. Chapter 1587. Shopping. Muyi's speed was terrifying. They flew over countless mountain ranges, but they didn't stop once. If they did, then those people from the everlasting palace might catch up with them. "Lin Feng, you haven't leveled up yet. We can find a place for you to rest and level up if you want. I don't have any ideas, so you can simply tell me where you want to go and I'll follow you," said Muyi as he smiled at Lin Feng. "I want to go to Qingdi Mountain, where the 9 great celestial castles are." "You must know about that place, right, Master Muyi?" asked Lin Feng. The 9 great celestial castles were very far, so it wouldn't surprise Lin Feng if Muyi didn't know where they were. "I do. You can access the small worlds from there. The place is all right, but there are so many people trying to rule over the small worlds there. The 9 great celestial castles have existed for a long time and are quite influential. I've never been there, but I know about it," said Muyi laughing. "I'd be happy to go there. It's probably a good place to exchange views on deployment spells." "I think so too," said Lin Feng smiling happily. The reason why he didn't ask to go back to Yaoyi Island was because most of the people from there had left to look for the great imperial everlasting palace. If he practiced deployment spells there, then they'd know he had received the everlasting Celestial Emperor's transmissions. Lin Feng still didn't know who the leaders of Yaoyi Island were, so he didn't want to risk it. Muyi and Lin Feng eventually arrived in the territory of the 9 great celestial castles. Lin Feng had already changed his face to one that nobody in the great world had ever seen. He hadn't been to the 9 great celestial castles for 3 years now, so he didn't expect to find too much trouble. His new identity was Mu En from the Everlasting Palace. The Everlasting Palace was in Xiang City, which is extremely far from the 9 great celestial castles, so nobody in the 9 great celestial castles should know about all their cultivators. Of course, Lin Feng had already told Muyi about all this, so Muyi was now also from the Everlasting Palace. Muyi was Mu En's uncle and they were traveling to become stronger. Lin Feng and Muyi didn't go to any of the castles, they stayed inside the buffer zone instead. Lin Feng and Muyi had found a courtyard and were seated on some stone chairs. They were chatting about the deployment spells they'd learned. Muyi had obtained the illusion deployment spell in his cave. Using illusion cosmic energy to carve its deployment marks was the most powerful way to cast the illusion deployment spell. Lin Feng didn't hide the fact that he had studied the shattering deployment spell. He had actually received all the deployment spells, but he hadn't told Muyi about that. They exchanged views about their respective deployment spells and even exchanged them. Lin Feng didn't mind giving his shattering deployment spell to Muyi. The Everlasting Celestial Emperor's deployment spells constitute an extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. After 3 years, I still have this feeling that I know very little about them. You're even more talented than me, Lin Feng, said Muyi sighing. Then he smiled and said, I wonder who he transmitted his knowledge to in the end when he released his godly awareness to everyone. Maybe he didn't give anything to anyone, trying to lure away the great emperor who was attacking him, said Lin Feng. No, in my opinion, he must have chosen 2 people. He couldn't risk letting his deployment spells disappear. Besides, he probably chose the most talented people. That way, when those people become strong and mastered his deployment spells, they'd attract the attention of the Everlasting Palace. His descendant will then fight against his disciple, avenging him. Muyi explained all this while smiling cheerfully. Lin Feng hadn't thought about it that much. When they left the forbidden area, strong cultivators were already waiting for them. That meant that the descendants of the Everlasting Celestial Emperor, who had received his transmissions, were already enemies of the Great Emperor in the cyan clothes. The Great Emperor wasn't going to let the Everlasting Celestial Emperor's descendants off. All the descendants could do now was to remain discreet as they continued to grow stronger. The Everlasting Celestial Emperor is cruel then, leaving his descendants in such danger, said Lin Feng laughing and shaking his head. If anyone had the choice, they'd still choose to receive his transmissions though, said Muyi smiling. He didn't know that Lin Feng had come out of a cave on his own, otherwise, he would have thought that Lin Feng had received the Emperor's transmissions. Lin Feng had also thought about that. He was wondering what the Great Emperor in cyan clothes thought when he saw him outside the cultivation caves. Did he know that it meant that Lin Feng had come out on his own? Master Muyi, you're right, nobody could refuse the Emperor's transmissions, said Lin Feng smiling. In the cave, apart from learning the shattering deployment spell, I also received some instructions concerning deployment spells. I need to study those memories some, and when I'm done, I'll show you too. That way we can progress together. Alright, practice well. I'm going to try practicing the illusion deployment spell while you're busy, said Muyi happily. Lin Feng nodded and went to his room. In the Everlasting Celestial Emperor's transmissions, there were methods to creating deployment weapons, which was different from creating regular weapons. To create these weapons, cultivators needed to carve holy marks in their deployment spells. They also needed some materials, soul strength, and fire. Lin Feng went back to his room and started studying the transmissions. Back in Tianqi, one of the leaders had given him a talisman in which he had carved holy marks into. Crushing that talisman had increased Lin Feng's speed by incredible amounts. If he could carve holy marks with wind and empty space strength, and then put them in a talisman, his speed would increase by a lot. It could be a life-saving tool in the great world. Lin Feng practiced for a month before he left his room and went to the market. There, he got some animal furs which he could use to carve holy marks into, creating talismans. Then, he went back to his room and spent even more time in there, 2 months. When Lin Feng came out the next time, he found that the courtyard was enveloped by mist. Lin Feng released his godly awareness but found that something was blocking him. "How is that illusion deployment spell, Lin Feng?" asked Muyi smiling. "Not bad at all. I really could get stuck inside," said Lin Feng laughing. "It's not that powerful, but it's okay. I've been practicing for a while now, but that's the best I can do. Illusion deployment spells are really difficult to understand," said Muyi smiling. Cosmic energy was better than abstruse energy to carve deployment marks with, and deployment marks carved using illusion cosmic energy were more powerful than other types of marks when casting illusion deployment spells. That was the reason why the spells was that powerful even though Muyi hadn't understood much. "Master Muyi, you're doing great already," said Lin Feng encouragingly. Muyi looked at Lin Feng and smiled. "Do you want to go out again?" "Yes, I need more materials to create a talisman and to cast more powerful deployment spells with," replied Lin Feng. Muyi nodded and said, "All right, you can go." Muyi waved and the illusion faded. A small path appeared and Lin Feng walked through it to go to the market in the buffer zone. Chapter 1588. The Power of the Deployment Talisman. Lin Feng walked through the market in the buffer zone, observing the many priceless treasures. Lin Feng bought some materials for his talisman first, and then he went to a place to get furs. "I need a high-quality fur to carve holy marks with, sir," said Lin Feng to an old man in a shop. He needed high-level items because ordinary items couldn't stand holy mark strength. "What animal level?" asked the old man. "As high as possible," replied Lin Feng. "I have a fur from an animal at the top of the Zun-Chi layer, a cyan thunder lion. But it's expensive," said the old man. High-level Zun beasts were difficult to kill, so their products were naturally extremely expensive. "A few holy weapons should be enough, right?" asked Lin Feng. He had many holy weapons to bargain with after he had gathered them during previous battles. The old man looked at the holy weapons and smiled. "That's fine." Then, Lin Feng exchanged the lion fur for the holy weapons. The fur was cyan and purple in color and looked to be in great quality. He didn't care about the holy weapons that much. With that fur, he could make a great talisman. If he managed to make a talisman, it would be priceless, even more valuable than all those holy weapons. Lin Feng took the fur and left the shop. He walked short distance and stopped again, this time because some people had appeared in front of him. The leader of the group looked like a noble. "Your Excellency, we want to exchange something for that animal fur you bought," said the young man who was wearing golden clothes. Lin Feng recognized the clothes as those worn by cultivators from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. "What are you asking for it?" asked Lin Feng smiling. "This holy weapon for your fur," said the young man, taking out a medium-level holy weapon. Lin Feng smiled again while saying indifferently, "Why don't you just steal it?" The young man frowned after he heard Lin Feng, but tried to remain calm and smiled calmly back. "Your Excellency, I'm Zhou Tianmu from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. If you give me that fur, you'll be able to say that you are my friend." "Why would I need that?" asked Lin Feng. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. He was wondering who Zhou Tianmu was relative to Zhou Tianshao and Zhou Tianro. Zhou Tianmu was at the top of the 8th Zun-Chi layer and his chi wasn't stable. Thus, Zhou Tianmu didn't seem that strong. Zhou Tianmu looked at Lin Feng in a cold way and said, "Your Excellency, I am willing to exchange a holy weapon for your fur. Don't be disrespectful now." Even though Zhou Tianmu didn't look amazing, he knew all the strong younger people in the 9 great celestial castles and Lin Feng wasn't one of them. "Why are you even being polite with him? Just steal his item," said someone next to Zhou Tianmu in a rude way. He was probably one of Zhou Tianmu's guards because he had broken through to the 9th Zun-Chi layer. "Very good, I'll use you to see how powerful my talisman is," said Lin Feng in a low voice. The guy in front of him took a large step towards him and a gigantic golden hand suddenly appeared above Lin Feng. But Lin Feng used his talisman against the golden hand. Boom! Explosions sounded as that strong cultivator gave a horrible shriek. His hand was broken and it was on fire. Slash! He released golden holy chi from his other hand to heal himself. Quickly enough, he managed to put out the fire. His face was deathly pale, like a sheet of paper, as he stared at his hand. That deployment talisman was terrifying. Zhou Tianmu and the other guy were shocked. That person's chi looked ordinary, but it was actually very strong. Since Lin Feng looked yellowish and sick, Zhou Tianmu had first proposed an exchange. He didn't want to steal it directly, but then Lin Feng had been impolite, so he needed to be taught a lesson. Lin Feng just wanted to try out his talisman, of which he had used demon and fire abstruse energies to carve the holy marks with. He had also used the shattering deployment spell, so defeating a cultivator of the 9th Zun Chi layer was nothing exceptional. He couldn't wait to improve his talisman with better materials, then he could crush any cultivator of the Zun Chi layer. "How dare you?" said Zhou Tianmu. Lin Feng smiled in a strange way and said, "Did you think I was going to let him attack me without protecting myself?" Lin Feng then took out 2 talismans and left. Zhou Tianmu looked pale. "Who are you? How come you dare attack our people from the Great Celestial Palace of Thoughtfulness?" "The Great Celestial Palace of Thoughtfulness?" said Lin Feng, stopping in the air. He looked at Zhou Tianmu in a cold way and said, "Give me your rings and break your connections to them." Kaboom! Zhou Tianmu immediately released chi. "Do you want me to take them myself?" asked Lin Feng, walking towards them with his deployment talisman in hand. Suddenly, Lin Feng disappeared as he turned into a shadow. The one whose hand had been injured a moment before looked terrified. He wanted to escape, but Lin Feng's deployment talisman immediately crashed onto his chest. Pieces of flesh exploded, and he started burning. He gave horrible shrieks before he was quickly reduced to ash. Isn't that Zhou Tianmu? He likes to bully weaker people, but he didn't expect to run into a talisman expert. People who fabricate deployment talismans are rare, and yet, he's a good one. He killed a cultivator of the 9th Zun Chi layer effortlessly with that talisman. I wonder if he made it himself, because if he did, he's even more talented than I'm giving him credit for. Somebody in surrounding crowd said. Lin Feng didn't care about them. He walked to the one who was burning, knelt a bit, and took his ring. Then he said indifferently, "You're very disrespectful." Then Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Zhou Tianmu and the other guy. He could easily kill them with his strength, but he had changed his face, so he couldn't use his real powers. He was Mu En from the Everlasting Palace now, and he was a deployment spellcaster. "Give them to me or I'll take them myself," said Lin Feng cruelly. He looked like a freak with his sickly yellow face. "Anyone can make mistakes, but you must forgive them when possible. The Great Celestial Palace of Thoughtfulness wants friends like you," said Zhou Tianmu, trying to scare Lin Feng using the Great Celestial Palace of Thoughtfulness reputation. "I don't care about that," said Lin Feng as he stepped towards Zhou Tianmu. But Lin Feng's intimidation worked as he immediately took out his ring and threw it at Lin Feng. "If you guys hide anything from me, I'll do the same to you," said Lin Feng indifferently. Zhou Tianmu glanced at his friend, and they both took out more rings and threw them at Lin Feng. They didn't want to take any risks now that they knew Lin Feng could easily kill them. "Piss off now," said Lin Feng. Zhou Tianmu and his guard then left. Lin Feng ignored them and continued walking ahead, not concealing himself as he moved. People who make talismans are interesting. Surprisingly, that guy doesn't fear the Great Celestial Palace of Thoughtfulness, thought the crowd in the distance. The Great Celestial Palace of Thoughtfulness will definitely look for him at some point. After all, Zhou Tianmu was part of their direct lineage. Chapter 1589. Chaos. Lin Feng walked back calmly. Muyi was still trying his illusion deployment spells when he made it back. He took Lin Feng inside a side and said, "Lin Feng, is there anything you'd improve here?" Lin Feng glanced around at the mist, and then he released his godly awareness and inspected the illusion. He couldn't find any exits. Bzz. Lin Feng suddenly jumped and moved around quickly. He realized that he really was stuck inside. He kept moving about but he always ended up in the same place. Mui smiled and said, "My illusion isn't big, but it works. I can't wait to learn how to make larger ones someday." "You will," said Lin Feng smiling. "Master Mui, I'm going to practice my shattering deployment spell in the courtyard, and I don't want to be disturbed," said Lin Feng smiling. Mui nodded, "All right, I won't be far." Lin Feng put his hand on the ground and started carving marks, each stroke being clear and distinct. "How strong," thought Mui. Lin Feng's deployment spells were far better than his, especially when it came to carving marks. His strokes were so precise and clear. Really strong deployment spellcasters don't even need to use their hands, they can simply use their feet. I need to sense the ground better with my hands. I wish I was at the everlasting Celestial Emperor's level though, he only used his mind to carve marks. That's the highest level," said Lin Feng smiling. Mui nodded back in agreeance. 4 hours later, Lin Feng managed to cast a powerful shattering deployment spell. Mui was astounded by his work. At that moment, he realized just how far he was from Lin Feng when it came to deployment spells. It seemed like following Lin Feng was the right choice. After casting the shattering deployment spell, Lin Feng went back to his room to make great talismans with the materials he had purchased. Meanwhile, Mui continued improving his illusion deployment spell. At that moment, some people arrived outside of Lin Feng's house and surrounded it. The leader of the group was an old man who looked very strong. Zhou Tianmu was standing next to him. They had brought many cultivators of the 8th and 9th Zun Qi layer with them. "Young master," shouted some people outside. They moved aside to let Zhou Tianmu pass. Zhou Tianmu looked furious as he said, "Where is he?" "In his room, but we can't see clearly because there's an illusion in the way," explained someone as he pointed at Lin Feng's house. Zhou Tianmu nodded. The old man next to him was a cultivator at the very top of the Zun Qi layer, but he wasn't talented enough to break through to the Huang Qi layer without fate seeds. The great celestial palace of thoughtfulness didn't care about him too much because of that. Zhou Tianmu wasn't that talented either, so he couldn't ask for help from their emperors, but this guy was at the top of the Zun Qi layer and had a force which was multiplied by 1,000. That should be enough to kill Lin Feng. "Let's go," said Zhou Tianmu. They arrived in front of the illusion, but the old man raised his hand and said, "Tianmu, you said he knew that you were from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness but still dared attack you. Let's see who he is first." "I'm Di Xiu from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. I came to greet you, your excellency," said the cultivator at the very top of the Zun Qi layer extremely loudly. Mi frowned. "Who?" Lin Feng came out of his room after he heard that guy. Lin Feng and Mui could clearly see outside from inside the illusion with their godly awareness. So many people came to greet them? "Piss off," said Lin Feng extremely loudly, leaving Di Xiu, Zhou Tianmu and the others upset. Just how arrogant could you get? "Di Xiu, that person is extremely arrogant, so don't be polite to him. Just go in and kill him," said Zhou Tianmu to Di Xiu. "Your Excellency, if you don't come out, don't blame me for coming in," said Di Xiu loudly. Nobody replied this time, making him feel even more humiliated. He groaned coldly and entered the illusion while releasing golden holy qi. But as soon as he entered the mist, he was moved somewhere else. "Deployment spell?" Di Xiu said, distressed. Suddenly he rose up in the air, trying to escape the spell. Zhou Tianmu and the others followed him, but their godly awareness were blocked. "A deployment talisman and now this. Is he a deployment spellcaster?" asked Di Xiu. Zhou Tianmu had said that that sick-looking young man probably hadn't made the talisman himself because they had never heard of such a strong deployment spellcaster in the region. "If you're not a coward, come out and fight," said Zhou Tianmu. He was getting impatient. "You're acting recklessly," said a voice. Then suddenly, the ground shook and marks appeared under his feet. A terrifying strength emanated from those marks. "Be careful." Di Xiu sensed something was coming. Zhou Tianmu released more golden holy qi, but a light rose up in the air and enveloped his foot. The light took his leg, but if he hadn't moved so quickly, his entire body would have been enveloped by that light. "Deployment spells again." Di Xiu was getting concerned, especially now that Zhou Tianmu was trapped. He had only lost his leg, but it would still be extremely difficult for him to heal. Barring that, they still had to get out first. "Let's get out," said Zhou Tianmu furiously. He started running, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get out. Di Xiu was petrified as he shouted, "Your Excellency! Forgive us, please let us leave, I beg you." "I told you to piss off, but you came in, now you're not going anywhere," said Lin Feng calmly. There was a subtle sound, like someone closing a door. Di Xiu's face turned deathly pale. "You must want to die," shouted Zhou Tianmu furiously. Then he took out a talisman and broke it. He could only use that talisman if he was in imminent danger. After breaking it, some strong emperors would come and save him. Outside the deployment spell, more people were gathering. "Let's go and inform Jin Chenjun." Then they disappeared. At the same time, some other people started running away to inform their respective groups that a powerful deployment spell master was in their territory. Not long after, some golden holy chi rose to the skies and a silhouette in a golden robe appeared. Someone dared threaten young people from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Chapter 1590. Shattering deployment spell. Jin Chenjun was seated cross-legged in one of the larger halls in the celestial chi castle. He looked excited after he overheard some people talking about a deployment spellcaster who was attacking people from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. "That's great. You said that person can also create deployment spell talismans?" asked Jin Chenjun. "I saw him with my own eyes. He killed a cultivator of the 9th Zun Chi layer with one. I don't know if he created the talisman himself though." That person replied. Jin Chenjun nodded and stood up. If Celestial Chi Castle could invite him, that would be interesting. Jin Chenjun knew that having a deployment spellcaster as a friend could be extremely beneficial, so he instantly rose up in the air without wasting time. At that moment, outside of Lin Feng's house, golden holy chi was madly dashing to the skies. People raised their heads to look at the cultivator who was unleashing that strength, but they couldn't even open their eyes because it was too bright. An emperor, a strong cultivator from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness, thought the crowd. That person was going to attack the deployment spell head-on because Zhou Tianmu and the others were stuck inside. Many people rushed over wanting to watch. That deployment spellcaster was extremely arrogant and despised people from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. But what could he do against an emperor? "Who dared attack my people?" yelled the emperor. He hadn't arrived yet, but he was already releasing chi and shouting furiously. After a few more minutes, he finally arrived in the sky above Lin Feng's house. "He's here." Illusion deployment spell? The emperor glanced around. He jumped forwards and released terrifying golden lights which surrounded the deployment spell. The cosmic energies from which the deployment spell was composed slowly faded. Muyi's deployment spell wasn't that strong after all. Just about any emperor could destroy it if they tried. Muyi was furious when he saw that. "Don't worry, Master Muyi, I can handle them," said Lin Feng, smiling indifferently. Muyi looked pensive, but then he smiled and nodded. He was wondering why those people were angry with Lin Feng. He knew Lin Feng didn't like them, but that was why he had put on a mask and had chosen a new identity. He couldn't figure out what Lin Feng's goal was. Muyi recalled his chi and walked to his room. He wanted to see how Lin Feng was going to deal with an emperor. The ground continued to quake as the illusion deployment spell was slowly falling apart. Finally, it broke, letting the clouds roll in waves and releasing those who were stuck inside. Zhou Tianmu and the others glanced around, realizing that they were actually very close to Lin Feng. "Kill him. Crush him," said Zhou Tianmu furiously. His leg was still bleeding, and his face was deathly pale. The strong cultivator in the sky looked down at Lin Feng in a cold way. "You dared attack people from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness?" asked the emperor when he saw that Zhou Tianmu's leg had been cut off. Even though Zhou Tianmu was weak, he was a direct descendant of the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Hurting him was equal to humiliating the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Boom boom. A terrifying strength fell from the sky. The emperor's eyes were filled with murder. Lin Feng glanced at him, and then he glanced at the people next to him, noting that they were getting ready to attack. Lin Feng suddenly descended from the sky, then lights flashed, and dazzling marks appeared underneath that emperor and the others. Those marks contained destructive demon and fire energies. Horrible shrieks ensued as those people instantly started burning to ashes. "Did I ask you to leave?" Lin Feng glanced at Zhou Tianmu, who was running away. "Your Excellency, your deployment spell is extremely powerful," shouted someone at that moment. Lin Feng turned around and saw Jin Chenjun. After seeing him, Lin Feng secretly smiled in his head. Lin Feng also noticed that some emperors were coming to watch. The emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked furious. Lin Feng had attacked him and his people. Zhou Tianmu and the others were enveloped by the deadly deployment spell, and Lin Feng could kill them at any time. Therefore, the emperor couldn't immediately attack Lin Feng. "Brother Zhou, you're an emperor, so you can't fight younger people, especially a strong deployment spellcaster such as this," said Jin Chenjun. He looked at Lin Feng and inspected his strength. Lin Feng had broken through to the 8th Zun Qi layer, so he had to carve his holy marks using abstruse energies. He would be even more terrifying after breaking through to the Huang Qi layer. "This has nothing to do with you, so just mind your own business," said the emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Jin Chenjun was getting involved, and the emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness knew why. Even so, he wanted to kill Lin Feng. If Lin Feng hadn't killed people from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness, he could have solved the issue peacefully, but now it was too late. Jin Chenjun's eyes glimmered as he looked at Lin Feng and asked, "Your Excellency, would you like to join the Celestial Qi Castle?" The emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness was furious after he heard Jin Chenjun. If Lin Feng joined the Celestial Qi Castle, then Jin Chenjun would protect him. Bzz. Suddenly, he flew forwards while enveloping Zhou Tianmu and the others in golden lights. Zhou Tianmu and the others didn't understand what was going on, so they rose up in the air. After they made it 1,000 meters high in the sky, they finally stopped. "Kill him," shouted Zhou Tianmu. "Of course we will," said the emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. "Your Excellency," said Jin Chenjun to Lin Feng, "I won't let the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness kill anybody from Celestial Qi Castle." What Jin Chenjun was implying was that if Lin Feng accepted to join the Celestial Qi Castle, then he wouldn't let anyone kill him. "I'm sorry," said Lin Feng smiling, leaving Jin Chenjun both surprised and disappointed. The crowd around was surprised too. Lin Feng had only broken through to the 8th Zun Qi layer, and he was facing an emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Yet, he refused the protection from Celestial Qi Castle. "Jin Chen, he doesn't care about you," said the emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness, smiling in a cold way. Then, he released golden holy qi which surrounded Lin Feng and said, "You must have wanted to bring about your own destruction. Die." The emperor released force which was multiplied by 1,000 and attacked Lin Feng. At the same time, he continued releasing golden holy qi which turned into a sharp light. He could easily kill a Zun cultivator with that sharp cosmic energies. Lin Feng shook his hand and threw his talisman in front of him. The golden holy qi crashed onto it, causing an explosion to sound in the air. Deployment spell pattern. The crowd figured out what was going on. The marks became more distinct as destructive demon fire energies dashed to the skies. Lin Feng seemed to be bathing in them. "Oh no!" The emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked concerned. He could feel just how destructive that demon fire was. He released more golden holy qi to create an armor around his body. However, that demon fire could seemingly break anything. The armor hadn't fully formed before Lin Feng's attack reached it. The armor fell apart and Lin Feng's strength penetrated his body. Shattering deployment spells are powerful, but because I can only use abstruse energies to carve the marks, I can't really do much, thought Lin Feng. "No!" the emperor shouted furiously. Even though demon fire was powerful, it couldn't kill him at his level. However, the destructive deployment spell was still hurting him. At the same time, Lin Feng grabbed his talisman with both hands and rushed over to him. Chapter 1591. Unstable situation. Lin Feng stretched out his hand and threw his talisman in the direction of the emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. That emperor spat out golden holy qi at the talisman. He was pushing back the talisman's power, but then he realized that he was surrounded by talismans in all sides. He released even more golden holy qi in a wave around him, causing some of the talismans to break. However, these talismans didn't release demon fire like the first. Instead, an illusion appeared and trapped the emperor inside. "Break!" shouted the emperor furiously. This time he used sharp sword lights to break the illusion deployment spell and the talismans inside. "Be careful!" shouted Zhou Tianmu and Di Xiu, both of whom were already far away. "Activate!" said Lin Feng, releasing more demon and fire strength, not giving the emperor even a second break. How cruel, thought the crowd. Lin Feng had directly thrown 20 to 30 talismans at the emperor. Each talisman could kill a cultivator at the top of the Zun Qi layer. Talismans were not like deployment spells in that they break after they release their strength. To anyone besides Lin Feng, using all those talismans was a complete waste. A horrible shriek sounded. That shriek came from the emperor. Even though he had a powerful physical body, it was difficult for him to resist that demon fire. The illusion finally broke apart, allowing the crowd to see the emperor again. But it was worse than they could have imagined as he was consumed in demon flames. His legs were gone, and he was looking desperate. He shook his hands, wanting to release cosmic energies, but he realized he couldn't. "I should make my spirit leave my physical body, at least that way it won't be as bad as dying," thought the emperor. His body gradually turned into nothingness as a terrifying cosmic strength dashed to the skies. Then he died, and his cosmic energies dispersed. What a scary person. It's no wonder he refused my invitation, thought Jin Chenjun. He was even more enthusiastic after seeing that sick-looking young man's strength. He had killed an emperor only using deployment spells, even though he had only broken through to the 8th Zun Qi layer. Di Xiu, Zhou Tianmu, and the other members from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked crushed. Their emperor was dead. Escape! Zhou Tianmu suddenly started running away. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and smiled evilly. "Did I say you could leave?" Zhou Tianmu was petrified, but he still stopped. Lin Feng could kill him whether he ran or not. Zhou Tianmu looked just like Zhou Tianshao and Zhou Tianrua. He was also a direct descendant of the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. He had enough influence to make an emperor come. Considering all of this, he was probably Zhou Tianrua's little brother. Of course, Lin Feng wasn't going to kill Zhou Tianmu because he was just a nobody. Even Zhou Tianrua was a nobody in Lin Feng's eyes, and Lin Feng didn't feel like wasting time with nobodies. Lin Feng only wanted to kill Zhou Tianshao, the one who had made fun of him and said that he didn't deserve being called a cultivator. Lin Feng suddenly slapped the air in Zhou Tianmu's direction, causing blood to splash out of his mouth as he flew away. Since Zhou Tianshao liked being aggressive to prove how strong he was, Lin Feng could do the same to his people. "Piss off," said Lin Feng in a disdainful way. Zhou Tianmu was crawling on the ground now, meaning he had to raise his head to look at Lin Feng. He felt humiliated. Surprisingly, Lin Feng despised him and humiliated him, and yet he looked calm. Lin Feng was telling Zhou Tianmu, "You are nothing to me." The only difference was that Lin Feng didn't feel like wasting his saliva to tell him that. Instead, he just said, "Piss off." While Zhou Tianmu was engrossed in his humiliation, Lin Feng landed before the other members from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Jin Chenjun walked up to Lin Feng and smiled. "I'm Jin Chen from the celestial Qi castle. What's your name?" Lin Feng glanced at him and frowned. "Are you used to being arrogant because of your social position?" Jin Chenjun frowned. Although he felt embarrassed, he continued smiling while saying, "Please tell me your name." "Mu En," replied Lin Feng. "If you have nothing else to say, you can leave." How arrogant! Even though Mu En's deployment spells were powerful, Jin Chenjun was an emperor after all. However, Jin Chunjun didn't show his emotions. He continued smiling and said, "I see, I won't bother you any longer then." Then he waved his hand and left. The other groups of influence left after they saw how Lin Feng had replied to Jin Chunjun. Only a few people stayed, allowing the atmosphere to become calm once more. Muyi felt how powerful those deployment spells were. He was surprised by Lin Feng's abilities. Lin Feng had killed an emperor with his shattering deployment spell, and that was only one of the 3,000 great deployment spells. If Lin Feng managed to get a hold of all 3,000 deployment spells, he'd be even more terrifying. He could become another everlasting emperor. Lin Feng continued practicing and making new talismans. News about Mu En spread within the 9 great celestial castles. Even the emperors were talking about him. People were starting to gather outside Lin Feng's house. They wanted to see the guy from the rumors. Was he real? Lin Feng was in the illusion deployment spell, so he didn't care that much about what was going on outside. Muyi was not so happy to have so many guests. "What is your purpose for coming here?" "There are too many people watching us," said Muyi smiling. "I don't care. They can just watch. I like the occasional excitement. Without them I'd get bored," said Lin Feng, smiling in a deep and meaningful way. Muyi shook his head. He didn't understand Lin Feng at all. "Some more people are coming. Shouldn't we activate the illusion?" asked Muyi. Lin Feng gazed into the distance and saw them. They were from the Palace of Medicinal Kings. Palace of Medicinal Kings. Lin Feng smiled evilly. Since they were handing themselves over, why not have some fun? Once they arrived, all their young men were fixedly staring at Lin Feng. They looked at the illusion deployment spell and then they waved at Muyi and Lin Feng, but only talked to Lin Feng. "We're from the Palace of Medicinal Kings. We came to see you because you're an amazing deployment spellcaster." Lin Feng didn't even glance at them when they were talking. He suddenly stood up and said coldly, "Who told you to stand in the sky above me?" "Your Excellency," that person wanted to explain, but Lin Feng shouted furiously, "Get the fuck down." "All right," said the young men. They had come to make friends with Lin Feng, but the illusion deployment spell disappeared just as they arrived. This led to the awkward encounter. Everybody landed on the ground, but then Lin Feng suddenly jumped up as marks appeared beneath him. He was absorbing their destructive energies, readying to release them at any time. The young men from the Palace of Medicinal Kings became pale and said, "Your Excellency, you dare invade the place where I am staying, you must kneel," shouted Lin Feng furiously. These guys were getting more upset and confused. Invaded the place where he stayed? What was going on? Chapter 1592. The fox borrows the tiger's fierceness by staying with him. The young men from the Palace of Medicinal Kings hadn't thought that things would go down that way. If they had come to Lin Feng's sect or clan, they would have been polite, but they were in a random courtyard, so they didn't need to be polite. They should be able to come and greet him with ease. Lin Feng looked furious. He took a step forwards and the destructive energies became more intense. The young men from the Palace of Medicinal Kings sucked up their pride, knelt down, and clenched their fists. He was humiliating them, but why? "Piss off now. And if you ever do that again, I'll kill you," said Lin Feng. They stood up and the leader of the group bowed before Lin Feng. "We didn't mean to disturb you. Your Excellency, I'll remember this next time." Then they left. Lin Feng had humiliated them, and they probably wouldn't forgive him for it. That guy was a great deployment spellcaster who could even kill emperors, which allowed him to have such a bad temper. If he had done what they did to him, coming without notice and looking down upon them, then the cultivators from the Palace of Medicinal Kings would have gotten angry too. Of course, they couldn't know that Lin Feng had lost his temper because the Palace of Medicinal Kings had humiliated his teacher back when he was trying to save him. Lin Feng had warned them, someday, he'd avenge his teacher and he'd crush them in their own territory. Things were just getting warmed up. This news all spread around. The deployment spellcaster was becoming famous. Other young men from the 9 great celestial castles didn't dare seek him out anymore, not after what happened to the young men from the Palace of Medicinal Kings. Qi Yunxiao was facing a group of people in Celestial Qi Castle. Jin Chunjun, What you mean to say is that we should remain calm? Asked Qi Yunxiao. Master, I went and talked to him, but he's a strange guy and he's not easygoing. He considers everybody and everything beneath his notice, no matter where they're from. A few days ago, he humiliated a group of people from the palace of medicinal kings. He also offended the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. Jin Chenjun explained. Qi Yunxiao and the other members from the celestial Qi castle thought highly of Muin. Even though he was only a cultivator of the Zun Qi layer, he could kill emperors using deployment spells. After breaking through to the Huang Qi layer, he'd become a priceless asset. Qi Yunxiao calmly listened as Jin Chenjun continued, Master, that guy is a cultivator of the Zun Qi layer and he can already kill emperors. On top of that, he despises everybody from the 9 great celestial castles. All of this tells me he's not a simple deployment spellcaster. Where did he learn his deployment spells? Who transmitted them to him? He can't possibly have learnt them on his own. You're right. I also thought about that. I believe that there must be a powerful cultivator supporting him. We can just wait and see how things play out. He offended the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. He even killed one of their emperors. They won't let him off. Emperor Dong, Emperor Qi, you two go and observe what happens. The great celestial palace of thoughtfulness will definitely do something, and we need you two to watch, said Qi Yunxiao. Even though they were both direct descendants of the Qi clan, Qi Yunxiao didn't even know their names. He didn't even know if they were younger or older than him. He just knew that people who were sent to the small world were weak. People who used fate seeds to break through to the Huang Qi layer had limited abilities. Roger, said Emperor Dong. Emperor Dong and Emperor Qi knew where they stood in the great world. Many people had a higher status than them in Celestial Qi Castle, even some of the younger people. Sometime later, a terrifying Qi surrounded Lin Feng's house again. Outside the illusion, there were 20 people wearing golden robes. Destroy the illusion deployment spell, said one of them. In a flash, an emperor released energies to attack the illusion. Break, shouted that emperor. Lights condensed and turned into a beam which moved towards the illusion. How audacious, shouted a loud voice, making the crowd shiver. A terrifying strength emerged from inside the golden lights. Then the golden lights suddenly broke apart and a gigantic hand descended from the sky, moving towards the emperor. The emperor's facial expression changed. His golden holy qi turned into a sharp sword. However, the gigantic hands still managed to grab him. The mist started surrounding him before he disappeared with the hand. Oh no! The group who was attacking Lin Feng looked petrified, especially the leader who jumped forwards. He released golden holy qi, which was a lot scarier than the previous emperor's qi. The earth and sky shook, and the mist gradually disappeared. After the mist dispersed, everybody was aghast, for the emperor who was dragged into the illusion was lying on the ground. Cosmic strength was emerging from his body and rising to the skies, indicating that he was dead. There were 2 people standing in front of him. One was Lin Feng and the other one was Mui. Nobody had paid attention to Mui before, but now they were. The gigantic hand which had appeared a moment before couldn't have been Lin Feng's, which meant that it belonged to his friend, Mui, a medium-level emperor. The strong cultivators from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked concerned. Your Excellency, who are you? Asked the medium-level emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness in a rude way. Things were more complicated than he had expected. Mui from the everlasting palace, said Mui. Chapter 1593. Invited by everyone. Everlasting Palace. The strong cultivators from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked defeated. Even though the everlasting celestial emperor was dead, they still couldn't offend them. Lin Feng was so strong that when Mui mentioned the everlasting palace, nobody doubted his words. The medium-level emperor glanced at them and people started thinking a lot. Finally, they decided to give up. The medium-level emperor had taken his disciple abroad to practice, so they could only forget about it. Your Excellency, you must be joking, said the medium-level emperor trying to smile. I wouldn't have thought that you were from the everlasting palace. This was just a misunderstanding. I represent the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness. I'm very sorry, Your Excellency. Lin Feng still looked at them in a cold way. Lin Feng also had many thoughts running in his mind. That was the advantage of being part of a very powerful group. He could benefit from a reputation without having to do much. If I managed to make Tiantai raise in the great world, then nobody would dare attack Tiantai's people again, just like Qingdi Mountain. Then, Tiantai could become a holy place. Thought Lin Feng. The medium-level emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked at Lin Feng and said, Zhou Tianmu. Zhou Tianmu shivered. Since Mui had mentioned the everlasting palace, Zhou Tianmu knew things weren't going to be simple. He had tried to steal fur from a cultivator from the everlasting palace. You're a useless bastard, said the emperor as he violently slapped Zhou Tianmu, making him fly away. He felt humiliated, and even worse, now he would never be able to get his revenge. Your Excellency, we need to provide our disciples with a better education. Please don't blame us, said the medium-level emperor while smiling at Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled and said indifferently, the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness are not my enemies. However, one of your disciple wanted to steal my stuff, so I taught him a lesson. Then he wanted to kill me, but luckily my deployment spells are not that bad. Now Uncle Mui protected me, otherwise, you would have killed me already. The medium-level emperor from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness looked embarrassed and said, if you want to punish Zhou Tianmu, our unworthy son, please do as you wish. It's easy to blame Zhou Tianmu for everything, but a moment ago, you also wanted to kill me. The cultivation world follows the law of the jungle, where the weak are prey of the strong. I can understand you want to blame others, but if Uncle Mui hadn't protected me, I'd be dead already and you would have killed people from the everlasting palace. Therefore, if I meet anyone from the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness that I can kill, I will not hesitate. How arrogant, thought the crowd. Lin Feng really had a bad temper. The great celestial palace of thoughtfulness was polite to him in the end and he still continued acting aggressive. He'd kill their people if he encountered them? How cruel and audacious. The strong cultivator of the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness was furious. That person was way too arrogant. He didn't give them face at all. Your Excellency, why do you need to act like that? Asked the strong cultivator coldly. Piss off, said Lin Feng. The emperor rolled up his sleeves and said, we already apologized, but if you don't care, then we can't do anything. We're off. Then he turned around and left. He was a medium-level emperor, but Lin Feng had told him to piss off. Did Lin Feng want him to kneel down and beg or what? Let's go, said Lin Feng while smiling at Mui. They activated the illusion deployment spell again, but Mui still didn't understand what was going on. Did you have problems with the great celestial palace of thoughtfulness in the past? I did, but it's not related to life and death, said Lin Feng, sitting on a wooden chair and looking at the sky. He was smiling in a deep and meaningful way. Master Mui, deactivate the illusion spell. Soon, some important people are going to come and see us. What are you scheming? Said Mui, shaking his head. He stood up and got ready to deactivate the illusion deployment spell. We're studying deployment spells, but we also need materials. If someone could help us, wouldn't it be even better? Said Lin Feng enigmatically. Mui deactivated the deployment spell and then, just like Lin Feng had said, someone came a short time after. Qi Yunxiao from the Celestial Qi Castle. I've heard about an amazing cultivator and here you are. I came to greet you. Lin Feng smiled but remained seated on his chair. Then he whispered, the Celestial Qi Castle is quick to act. Now that they've lost control over the small world, they really want to find other ways to have power. Come, said Lin Feng calmly. There were many people from Celestial Qi Castle waiting for them outside. Emperor Dong, Emperor Qi, they were all there. Qi Qianxing was there too. Of course, Lin Feng had changed a lot. Back then, Qi Qianxing had banished him, which wasn't something he'd forgive. What do you want from me? Asked Lin Feng. I've heard an amazing cultivator was here, so I came. We wanted to invite you to come over to Celestial Qi Castle, said Qi Yunxiao politely. The Celestial Qi Castle isn't the only group in here, said someone else. We're from the Celestial Palace of Punishing Thunders. We also wanted to invite you. Celestial Wind Castle, we wanted to invite you. Outside, more and more people appeared. As expected, these people were all interested in getting to know cultivators from the Everlasting Palace. They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.